Call the July 9th meeting of the Talbot County Planning Commission to order. This is a continuation from our July 1, 2020 meeting. First item on the agenda is our decision summary approvals, and they are postponed until August 5th, 2020. So we're going to, I guess anything, Mary Kay, is there any old business?
Yes, sir.
Okay, no old business. So we're going to amend the agenda slightly. We're going to go ahead and have our discussion items first. Our first applicant is Tillman on the Chesapeake, and the agent is Brett Newman. Brett, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Commission, planning staff. Appreciate you guys having us back on. Want to check on that?
No, go
Good, okay. Obviously, I provided the memo. I'm hoping everybody saw that. It just kind of briefly outlined, obviously, that the May meeting, we had a formal hearing for the 6-lot subdivision, or excuse me, major revision. It was a reduction from 26 down to 6. The commission cited several concerns. I think the main ones being inconsistency with the comp plan and the intent of that to promote development into the village areas. So we went back to the drawing board after that meeting. We received a denial, and we went back and we revised the layout to be a 10-lot subdivision that gave each lot frontage on the roadway, Spinnaker Way, that exists today. It exists as a public way, or it's been dedicated to the county. It has not been accepted, but it's a dedicated public road. We're going to maintain that. But what we did was we actually increased it to 10 lots as opposed to 6. And in the memo, I explained why we chose 10. I think 10 is consistent with the zoning ordinance that's currently out there today, which in turn makes it somewhat consistent with the comprehensive plan. I don't want to rehash every point in the letter. I hope you guys read the letter, but just some main points. It is the village mixed zone. And in that zone with sewer, the allowed density in the current regulations is 1 unit per acre. The property size that we're talking about is just over 10 acres, or excuse me, 11 acres, but we have about 1.5 acres in roadway. So about 10 acres would be used for actual subdivision. So that, again, 10 lots, 10 acres yields 10 lots, which is consistent with the current density of the zoning ordinance. Just kind of going through some of the language again, lot size, the minimum lot size in this zone is 30,000 square feet. The current subdivision with 26 lots is non-compliant, so in other words, it's grandfathered in. So our kind of redesign revision would make it compliant with the lot size standards that are in place today. Lot width, another situation where the current lots are non-compliant, and our new design would make them all compliant and give flexibility for potential buyers and owners to develop the entire parcel as opposed to just portions of the parcel that meet that 100-foot minimum width requirement. Overall, the comprehensive plan, I think we have consistency with that. The plan typically provides policies and recommendations that are that guide zoning regulations. And again, the zoning ordinance now calls out the VM district with sewer as 1 unit per acre. Chapter 9 of the comp plan just talked about community design and appearance. And in that section 9.15, it specifically says as a policy, the county will review permitted density and bulk requirements for all village zoning districts. Density shall reflect village lot sizes existing after zoning boundary modifications. Existing dwelling units per acre and other factors will be considered through the rezoning process, keeping in mind the unique character of each village. So that was in the comprehensive plan. After that language in the comp plan, the county went through the rezoning process, next step 190. And then through the next step 190 process, the densities were increased to 1 unit per acre. So we feel we are consistent with the comprehensive plan based on just how the design is relative to the code. Just a quick overall note too, again, I mentioned it once before, the road's going to remain public. We're going to get rid of those 2 spur cul-de-sacs. I think those are, somewhat of a pain to maintain, I think, for both county and private folks. So we're really confident that this design would work. We're confident it's consistent with the comp plan and the zoning ordinance, and we hope that you guys agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Stranahan, any questions, comments?
A question on the roadway. I addressed this last time you were here. It's going to remain a public road and dedicated if the county accepts it.
Yes.
Is it the plan of the developer when this comes, as it was when there was a 26-lot subdivision, to bring that road up to county standards so that it can be accepted?
Yes. Yeah, I've actually had discussions after our meeting in May, with the roads engineer for the county, and just discussed a few options. There's some language in the roads ordinance that allows flexibility with the overall improvement design, that the county could still accept a road if you don't meet the minimum specification. For instance, or example, the minimum specification for a public road, I think, is 36 feet wide. And that just seems overkill for a 10-acre or 10-lot subdivision. And so there's provisions in the code that allows for a reduction in the actual travel surface width, where you maintain the right-of-way. Long story short, I think we've had discussions. I think they're acceptable. They haven't given us a guarantee, but I think we're going to work with them to provide a product that they can accept, and it still be a public road. Yes.
Okay. I think one of my concerns with that, it's also the 4 existing home sites that share that road.
Yes.
Beyond that, and I haven't spoken to them, I don't know, but I'm sure they felt the intention was that this would be a public roadway maintained, that the county would accept and maintain,
Yeah.
which would take away their portion of having to help maintain.
That's correct. And so our intention is to make it a public road, dedicated and accepted by the county.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Desi?
Thank you so much, Mr. Ewing. I think that you've made a very strong case, and you are going back and rethinking this, and you've addressed some of the considerations that we had last time as well. So I think you've done a nice job with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I would agree with Commissioner Desi. I appreciate you putting the effort to come back. I think this is consistent with the comp plan. I think it'll be a nice transition from the village zone into our other zone. So I think this will work. So I guess at this time I'd ask if there are any comments from anybody, either calling in or in the room.
Also just checking if Mr. Boycourt's on the call. It seems like there's no other comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, hearing none, we will entertain the motion.
Well, this is just discussion.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
yep.
I mean, I'd be happy to take an approval.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
Okay, next discussion item is 219 Federal LLC. The agent is Zach Smith, and I believe we have Zach on the phone. Okay. Zach?
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Councilman.
Yep. Great, okay. We're ready for you, Zach.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Zach Smith on behalf of 219 Federal LLC and Mr. Mark Hill. As the Commission may know, Mark is the principal of Bailey Marine, a very well-established and well-respected local marine construction contractor. And Bailey has been in business here in Talbot for over 100 years. This is a family-run business. I think currently 3 generations operating the business today. Bailey currently operates from a location at the end of 4th Street here in Easton, but with the town's planned redevelopment for Easton Point, Mark began looking for a new headquarters location a couple years ago. And through a search, he found a location in Bellevue, 30,000 square foot parcel. It was the former site of a seafood packing house, and that packing house is long been gone. There's still, when Mark looked at the property, there was still some concrete pads and gravel areas, oyster shelters, but the site was unimproved. Mark went ahead and purchased the property in 2017 and began working with Lane and the county to permit site modifications and improvements that would be necessary to establish the site as its new headquarters for Bailey. Under circumstances, this project has only involved staff level review, which is the reason why this hasn't formally been presented to the Planning Commission. But we asked to be before the Planning Commission today to address an issue that's come up involving required landscaping. And as the Commission knows, the zoning ordinance generally requires new landscaping to be installed as part of any new development project. And so accordingly, when Lane laid out the site, John and Danny developed a landscaping plan that complied with the landscaping requirements in the ordinance. And Mark was certainly willing to implement that, understanding that's what was required. But when Mark engaged the landscaper to go ahead and install the required plantings, the landscaper told him that due to the soil conditions, the landscape professional did not believe the plants would survive. Mark then consulted a second landscaper who told him the exact same thing. And the issue here is that the entire site is comprised of a thick layer of oyster shells. At one point, Mark had a soil scientist examine the site, and the scientist determined that there's a 16 to 20 inch layer of oyster shells across the entire site, and that the soil below that layer of oyster shells is very compact, and that's obviously due to the prior use of the site. And this creates a situation that, like the landscape professionals reported, is not conducive to plant material, especially plants with deep roots. So in light of those facts, Mark went back to the county staff to seek relief from the strict application of the landscape requirement. Mark was advised to develop an alternate landscape plan, but directed to include trees and bushes in certain areas, partly to provide screening from the neighboring use. So Mark went back to one of the landscapers, George Manahan, to develop an alternate plan. Mr. Manahan did that, and that plan, contemplates some different plant materials and involves Mark bringing in a foot of topsoil on the site. And so it's better, but even that plan, the landscapers won't guarantee the plantings and say it's still not certain that anything will survive. And so now Mark's faced with a requirement to install plantings in a situation where the professionals are telling him they're not going to survive or they're unlikely to survive. I mean, Mark would prefer not to install the plantings because he doesn't want to, waste money. And I think the estimate is about $27,000 to do the work. But he is willing to plant the trees. He understands that that's a county requirement and he's willing to do it. But what he really doesn't want to do is get, I think quite reasonably, is have to pay to replant the site if and when these plants don't survive, which I think everyone fully expects will happen. And so, per the county policy, in addition to planting the initial planting, he's required to sign an agreement committing to replanting if the plants don't survive, and required to post a bond with the county to guarantee his performance. And he's concerned, I think understandably, that this could get him stuck in sort of an endless cycle of having to install trees in locations that simply aren't suitable for such given the soil conditions. And so we have to appear before the commission this morning to make you aware of the issue and to see if there are any ideas for how to address this and avoid this eventuality that we see. I know from discussions with Miguel that the commission is contemplating some provisions for your working waterfront overlay, and that the new rules may provide some flexibility for landscaping. I wish that flexibility were available today because I believe this site would be an ideal candidate for the reasons I've mentioned. Unfortunately, we don't have time to wait until the commission comes up with those rules and begins to implement them, if you're going to do that, because we're sort of at the final hour here with Mark's project. The staff has told us that if he doesn't get his final approvals by the 12th of July, which is Sunday, so really I think by Friday, if he doesn't get his approval by this Friday, then he's going to have to start that process over again. And I'm not blaming the staff for that. I mean, that's largely attributable to how we move through this process. But anyway, that's where we are. And so to avoid that scenario, Mark is reluctantly prepared to sign the agreement and post surety, but again, doesn't want to get caught in this endless cycle. So we're here today, I guess, just to make you aware of the issue, and if the commission is willing and able to waive these requirements or to help us in any way, we'd ask that you please do so. If the commission is unable today to waive requirements or to modify them, we just ask for you to keep this project in mind as you work on these working waterfront rules, and to hopefully develop some flexibility. And perhaps, we go ahead and sign the agreement to post the bond, but we could revisit this issue in the fall before the plantings actually go in. Hopefully by that time, maybe there is some flexibility, and we can discuss it. Again, Mark's not trying to get out of anything. He's willing to plant. He'd certainly be willing to pay a fee in lieu. He'd be willing to plant trees, if there's a park in W or some county land, plant trees there. He just doesn't want to waste the money. And more importantly, I think he doesn't want to get caught where he has to continuously pay and fight nature, which just doesn't seem to want to support these trees at this location. So that's why we're here, and happy to take any comments you have.
Thank you, Zach. So Mary Kay, what possibilities do we as a planning commission, in other words, so my question would be, can we waive the landscaping plan? Can we alter the fee in lieu of plan? In other words, what can we realistically do as a planning commission? Now, obviously, we can't do it today because we have no formal request before us, but
Right, so I'd also ask Lisa to come up because she's dealt with this quite a bit in working with the applicant. But I think as noted, the possibility for him to post a bond in order to be able to move forward with getting his final site plan approval, and then allowing the flexibility for us to work with him and determine. We have done several things, and I think Lisa can attest to this, to even to the point where we said, you don't have to plant the entire site consistent with the plan that we've provided. Let's do a planting area where you can plant different varieties of species within a defined area, and let's see what survives and what can handle the conditions of the soils and the site conditions of this particular area. And then we will know, these kind of plants do work, these don't, so let's amend the plan to put more of these varieties in that did thrive in this area. Or, if it's just determined that nothing's really going to work because of the soil condition, then we can work with the applicant to determine the next steps with the fee and lieu and different things. But until we really know and have an opportunity to plant something there, I don't think we've particularly received something specific from a contractor that said nothing will survive here, period. I think that there have been some comments that the soils are not good or supportive of certain types of vegetation, and we'll probably have problems because of the conditions. So I think we wanted to allow some flexibility to do a little planting area, see what works, and I'd ask Lisa to kind of chime in, because as I said, she's been working with the applicant quite a bit as well, the environmental plan.
I mean, we've been very supportive of a revised landscaping plan. He had a professional landscaper, George Straightham, come up with a revised landscaping plan. We have,
Switch your lights on.
we have concentrated the landscaping. Of course, the entire site, we want to be vegetated in some way. We don't want bare earth on a waterfront piece of property. There are two concerns with the screening on either side of the parcel. This parcel has with the former packing house, now residence, like 10 feet from the property line on the one side, and then there is another residence on the other side. So we concentrated the canopy trees in those areas to screen those residences, and we have herbaceous material and shrubs. I mean, it's not we have made the concessions with the landscaping plan.
So Miguel, under the current landscaping requirements, if we were looking at the proposed working waterfront landscape requirements, can you tell us, either you or Lisa, what the difference would be?
Well, under the proposed draft into the draft working waterfront overlay district. The applicant, in this case, would be exempt from the overall 25% landscaping requirement on the property and also from any interior parking lot landscaping. They still would be required to apply a perimeter landscape adjacent to, that's adjacent to existing lots. The width of that depending on what kind of use is next to it. The majority of the lots, or a lot of, I should say lots that would have the overlay applied on it would very often include the critical area and the 100-foot buffer or some sort of modified buffer. So per critical area law, they would still need to mitigate any development activity on that lot if it impacts the buffer or the critical area. Of course, there are options for fee in lieu. Those options already exist in the current ordinance, and they would still exist in the new ordinance. We are looking at opportunities for the application of fee in lieu towards specific shore protection type of capital projects. But I think if we come up with something innovative down the road, that's going to be an amendment to that overlay at some future point in time if we ever work on something with the critical area for that.
So, Elisa, what would a current fee in lieu of look like today, and would he still be required for the perimeter plantings with a fee? In other words, could you give us a little update?
Well, he actually has 4 requirements because of critical area, landscaping. He has a requirement to mitigate 2-to-1 for the new water-dependent facility. He has the landscaping. He has buffer establishment, and then he has a 15% afforestation requirement. So we used the fee in lieu, which is 30 cents a square foot, for the afforestation, a portion of the afforestation requirement to eliminate some of the canopy trees. We are using the mitigation for the water-dependent activity, the buffer establishment, and the landscaping. We're using those credits. We're commingling those credits. Like, he doesn't have to do X for just one thing. We're using what he's planting as landscaping towards his afforestation, towards his mitigation, towards his buffer establishment. You know, we're trying to work with the applicant, you know, to get the site vegetated and screened, you know, but we have, you know, and we have come up, I mean, I think we have a plan now that we can work with, but there is, you know, Mr. Hill was very concerned about having to replant if he plants one time and the material dies.
So and again, I'll ask either of the three of you. So if the applicant plants and whatever he plants doesn't survive, is there something, in other words, is there a provision somewhere to say, okay, this just isn't going to work? In other words, I guess, yeah, I mean, I'll stop there. In other words,
I think, like I said, the first thing is we have 2 residences on either side. We have a parcel that sat there undeveloped for probably, I don't know how long. I think the seafood packing plant was torn down like maybe 20 years ago. So you have 2 residences, occupied residences on either side. So that's, I mean, that's just a concern.
right.
You know, that, you know, he has 5 waterman slips down on the water. He has an aquaculture operation that he's going to be operating, plus the marine contractor. So these are all pretty busy activities. So, but we are willing to work with him, but we don't know what will work.
Okay, so and I'll go back to, if he plants, the plantings don't survive, where will the county stand on that?
Well, the ordinance requires them to maintain landscaping. So we would, I guess we'd have to look at why they failed. I mean, are
Okay, well,
they?
they're gonna fail because of the soil conditions on the site, so let's go with that premise.
I have to note it, he is planting a variety of species on this property, and we're determining which ones thrive and which ones don't. We're not anticipating that everything that he plants is not gonna make it. I think if we ultimately got there and we were able to say that it was because of the soil, then maybe there's some alternatives for some additional fee in lieu. But our concern is that, especially on the areas where we're doing the perimeter plantings between these
Yep.
two different types of uses,
Right.
that maybe in those areas, we go with another alternative. You know, is there some other type of plantings that he can do? But if in the general, the other areas that we're asking to plant and those don't survive, maybe ultimately, if nothing is surviving there, we can determine whether fee in lieu or something else is suitable. But I think we need to come up with what are our minimum standards that we're going to make sure that he, you know, meets those irregardless. You know, do we need to come up with a different type of species? Maybe it was just the wrong species in that area.
Okay.
I think Mary Kay, sorry, I was gonna say, Mary Kay, correct me if I'm wrong, there isn't a waiver option for landscaping in the zoning ordinance. There's an option for alternative landscaping plans that can be approved by the planning commission. But in, for instance, in the off-street parking section, there are opportunities for waivers to reduce parking requirements, for example. But that option just doesn't exist in the landscaping section.
Okay.
May I ask a question?
Sure, absolutely.
In terms of the area, I understood Mr. Smith to say that they recently discovered, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this was where the oyster shells were discarded. My first question has to do with the area. My second question has to do with the area that these oyster shells were discarded in terms of the square footage as well as the depth. And then my second question was, has it even been explored to remove those oyster shells and replace it with dirt, or at least down to a certain level?
Well, I think that's the plan. I mean, you aren't gonna find
Is that
a more
question
professional person than George Greencomb. I mean, and I think that is part of the installation, is that he's going to excavate out these tree pits and place soil in there. He's selected the locations close to the house and in the screening area where he thinks is the best chance of survival. We already eliminated some of the canopy trees, and in the other areas where we know there are a lot of oyster shell and other material, it's going to be herbaceous materials, which, you know, Mr. Hill is going to establish himself. So, I mean, I think that's part of the plan, but
So all along you are amending the soil
Yes.
to come up with less calcium and the other nutrients that the oyster shells
yes,
are contributing.
I think they're planning on having irrigation. You know, I mean, they're gonna, you know, we're gonna give it the best shot we can.
Mr. Smith, I think I unheard you say something. Did you want to contribute? Mrs. Zach Smith had said something.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my technology's let me down a little bit. Signal's going in and out. I'm losing part of the conversation, but I was just asking, you had asked a question about removing oyster shells and replacing that with soil, and I just wasn't sure if you were directing that question to me or someone else. That's the last I heard.
Well, I'd be happy to hear what you have to say. Elisa DeFlo had just responded.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess that's always a possibility. I'm not sure that, you know, desirable from our standpoint. Certainly sounds very expensive. I can't say it's not doable, but it's certainly not the direction that I think he was hoping to move it.
Well, has it been explored? I mean, you don't really know the answer until you get some quotes, right?
I mean, certainly Mr. Hill, in the business of what he does, he knows what it would cost to excavate the entire site, down 2 feet, and then to bring in topsoil to fill that back in. That'd be a lot of disturbance in the critical area. I'm not sure that would be consistent with what the county wants. But yeah, I mean, I can certainly go back to him and let him know that you would recommend that he consider that and see if that's something that may be possible. But I would imagine cost prohibitive or not desirable.
Yeah, and I always thought that in the landscaping areas that was going to occur. I mean, it has to occur on sites that aren't, impacted in this way sometimes.
This is Mike Stranahan, Mr. Smith. From what Mr. Flo had said earlier in this conversation, and along with what you were saying right now, we're not talking about, the question didn't involve excavating the entire site. It was just in the, I was understanding as the perimeter screening areas, just where the tree pit, I believe, was the description used. So we're not even at this point talking about excavating the entire site and bringing dirt in.
Yeah, even the landscaper has suggested.
Sorry, hold on 1 second here. Okay, Zach, sorry about that. Zach, can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Can you repeat that again?
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure. So, the landscaper did certainly contemplate that we would need to bring in topsoil, whether, some of those oyster shells would be removed. Certainly they'd be removed in places that are excavated to plant trees, and topsoil would be brought in. But, the issue is the oyster layer, but also the highly compacted soil below that layer of oyster, just from years of the activity that occurred on the site. So, from what the landscaper said, even if we bring in soil and put it around the planting area, they still won't guarantee the plants. It's still foreseeable that the plantings will die. So I'm not sure that solves the problem, but certainly something that's being contemplated to some extent with soil there.
So I visited the site, and I've been familiar with that site pretty much my whole life. So obviously it was a heavy, what I would consider to be, for the time, heavily industrialized. It was a packing plant forever, the shells, whatever. So my prediction is, not that I'm an expert by any means, but I think the plantings will survive until they're under stress. And that's either going to be heat or excessive winter weather. And what happens is when you have those compacted soils below anything you plant, the water can't get away from it and the roots can't get established. So I understand what the applicant's doing. I understand the county's position is let's try something. So, my gut reaction would be let's try something on a small area, and I certainly would hope, if and when, I hope it doesn't, I hope they come up with something, but if they don't, I would certainly hope this is one of those situations where common sense would prevail and somebody would say, okay, this just isn't going to work. What's the next step? And our experience has been with moving dirt, with filling eroded areas. You can do whatever you want, but it's just not in the cards for a lot of those areas to establish it. Just, like I said, as soon as they come under stress, it just falls to pieces. But Commissioner Spees, do you have any comments on this?
I think it's going to be a difficult situation. I think it's going to be a difficult situation. What I always nervous about is, making an applicant do all the trials, and, it's a cost to them. And then with, experts telling them it's going to, multiple options are going to fail, that's hard for me to impose on an applicant. But I also understand where the county is, and we have, we have regulations that we need screening. So I'm kind of leaning towards what Chip just mentioned, and how we go about that, it will be the interesting thing. But trying it in a small area, because I don't see even bringing, I'm with Chip, I don't see with that compaction and that the layer of oyster shells how you're going to get anything to really take off. But trying in a small area and see if we can find something, I'd be up for that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to mute everybody, and I believe Mr. Boycourt's on, so I just have to
Okay, great.
identify him. Mr. Boycourt, are you in the call?
I am, but the audio is only about less than half time.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
But the audio is only about half time. I am on the call. I can only hear about half the conversation.
If I could just remind the commission members and staff to speak really right on top of the mic, that would be great.
If I may, I agree with what Chairman Council and Commissioner Spies had to say about this. However, and we do need to move forward looking for circumstances every chance we can to make this work, because we also have to consider the neighboring properties as well.
Commissioner Desi, anything further?
Yeah, okay. Can I just verify, Mr. Boycourt? Mr. Boycourt, can you speak? Mr. Boycourt, do you hear me? Oh, I got him. Mr. Boycourt? Let me try him again. Mr. Boycourt, can you speak, please?
Can you hear me now?
Keep speaking.
I'm here. The audio, I guess, has been uncertain. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, well, one sec here. Okay, Mr. Boycourt, can you speak one more time?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but I need you to keep speaking so I can identify you.
Hello? You have it now?
Yeah, I can. I'm going to, bear with me, commissioners, mute everybody so that I can narrow you down here. Okay, go ahead and speak, Mr. Boycourt.
Okay, I'm speaking not about.
Can you sing a song?
Okay, one more time. Can you hear me now, Mr. Boycourt? Can you hear me now, Mr. Boycourt?
I can.
Got it.
Okay, okay. Mr. Boycourt, do you have any comments on this discussion item?
Well, I'm behind your reasoning, and I came in late, so I'll be quiet.
Well, that's fine. So Lisa, would it be possible, in the interest of the applicant, again, I think the only alternative is to excavate, bring in some better soil, see what happens along the property, but would it be possible ahead of time to tell the applicant, look, if this doesn't work, this is what the fee in lieu of is going to be, just so he isn't, in other words, I understand his concern about where does this end, where are we, I don't want to get down the road and it, is X number, at least he'll know going in. Is that possible?
He's already, gonna pay a portion of a fee in lieu for the afforestation. So we have had that discussion about afforestation.
Yeah.
Fee in lieu. We eliminated as many woody
Yep.
things as we could out of the landscaping plan.
Right.
The basic concern is the screening.
Right.
And we haven't had, we have a plan that was prepared by a professional. Obviously he selected plant species that he feels would have the best chance
Right.
to survive there. I think they're in parts of the yard area where if it was impacted less, along the property line
Right.
with the neighboring property and kind of in
Yep.
the rear,
Yeah.
areas to screen
Yeah.
Mr. Turner and Mr.
Right.
the big
Yeah,
house. So, I mean, we just have to, try and.
Yeah, okay, but we're still not answering the applicant's question. If it fails,
Well, I
what happens?
I don't have the
Well,
ability to
so
say.
I guess that's what I'm looking for.
So I don't think the ordinance specifically allows us to just not do anything there. There are provisions, as Miguel noted, for alternative plans versus just a waiver of everything. So, I mean, I think unfortunately, we're gonna have to have the applicant post a bond and move forward with some plantings and see what occurs and make decisions based on what survives, what doesn't, and how we can do an alternative plan with the knowledge of
Yeah.
what's moving, you know.
Okay. Well, Zach, I feel like we've not helped you at all, quite honestly.
No, no, I appreciate it, and I recognize the challenge here, and I know the intent of the ordinance, and it's a good thing, and I get it, and I get the concern of the neighboring property. I would say this is a commercial property. It's, you know, there's not going to be a large building or anything. There's a relatively small shed, and it's essentially an area to park equipment and to meet and to get on their barge and to go. I think it's been a commercial site for a long time next to this residential structure, so I'm not sure there's a tremendous need to buffer it and a concern, but nonetheless, I appreciate what the rules are. And so you have been helpful here in that we've had the discussion. I think everyone's now aware of the issue. It sounds like the staff's willing to let us, you know, do a little test plot and see what survives, and I hope that if stuff doesn't survive, that there'll be some flexibility. I think Mark's concern is he was about to sign an agreement and put up a bond that if held to it, would make him just continuously replant here for the next 100 years.
Right.
He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to keep throwing good money after bad. So I think we have to have a little faith in the reasonableness of the county and just move forward on that basis. I don't think we have any other option other than scrap the project, which really isn't an option at all.
Well, I have faith in the county staff that they will work with the applicant. And again, if the test plantings don't work, you know, I feel confident that the county, you know, will do something that's reasonable. So that I certainly think everybody has to understand that. So
I would definitely like to.
And I agree with that.
Sorry, this is Mary Kay. I would like to add to that, you know, we definitely understand the specific constraints to this site, and we are not going to make someone replant something that did not survive, and we know that that's not the appropriate types of planting for this particular site. We're not going to have him continue to replant that same type of vegetation over and over again with the knowledge that it's not going to survive. We will definitely work with him with alternatives and see what did do better than something else. And, you know, if the trees, a certain type of tree doesn't survive, you know, maybe there's an alternative. If a certain type of vegetation doesn't survive, you know, maybe there's other alternatives, or maybe in this test plot, one particular type of plant that doesn't have deep roots does better than something else. So, you know, maybe we can do more of that. You know, maybe that might be inconsistent with the code to have so much of the lower vegetation than the trees, but if that's what's surviving on that property, we will work with them to make sure that we.
okay, Zach, there's your statement that does help you. That's what I was looking for. Thanks, Mary Kay.
Yeah, and the only concern there would be, you know, we spend $27,000 and plant the site, and nothing survives. We come back, we have to spend, even if it's different plants, we got to spend a comparable amount again. But so I think the test plot is probably the best solution, to put something out there, you know, take a look at what survives, what doesn't, and then make an informed decision moving forward. I think Mary Kay suggested that, so I think that's the best path forward. It's unfortunate for my client who got posted to bond during that period. I mean, that's not a lot of money to some folks, but, you know, it ties up some of his cash. But nonetheless, that's where we are. We'll do that, do the test plot, see what works, and move forward. So I appreciate the staff, I appreciate the commission. Thank you very much.
Yep. Any further comments before we wrap this one up? Okay. Commissioner Gesson.
Mr. Boycott, any further comments?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that wraps up our discussion items. Next, we will move to new business. Our first applicant is Susan Payne and others, care of Vincent Payne. Their agent is Sean Callahan, Lane Engineering. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning. Sean Callahan, Lane Engineering here for the applicant. Danny Walton with Lane Engineering here and also.
Sean, is your mic on?
I believe so.
Okay, good. So, Elisa?
The applicant is Susan R. Payne and family in care of Vince Payne. The project name is Ripple Family Revision Plat. The agent is Sean Callahan, Lane Engineering. The applicant is requesting a major revision plat approval for the purpose of reconfiguring 32 existing lots of record into 15 larger lots. The request is reviewed under the previous Chapter 190 of the Talbot County Code. Bill number 1401, which repealed and replaced Chapter 190, allowed the applicant that received preliminary plat approval prior to the effective date of the bill to be subject to or reviewed under the previous chapter by submitting a written election of exemption to the planning officer. The applicant is also requesting 2 waivers to allow existing piers to remain on 2 newly revised lots, unnamed Lot 1 and Section D, Lot 1, where no residential principal or primary use has been established. The waivers are consistent with 190-33.1B3 according to the Talbot County Code. 190-7141B decisions on waivers associated with major revision plats shall be made by the Planning Commission. The location of this project is 5639 Poplar Lane, Royal Oak, Maryland. The former zoning is Village Center. Staff comments: the applicant has made the choice to comply with the former Chapter 190 zoning regulations, including the Village Center District standards. The applicant will ensure that the plat is consistent with that code. Staff has recommended the applicant revise the lot numbers for a consecutive identifier. An example of the enumeration is R1A for Section A, revised Lot 1. The applicant continues to show a path in the 100-foot buffer over Section D, Lot 1, unnamed Lot 1, that is no longer present south of the tidal outfall adjacent to Pier Number 2. Staff has worked with the critical area staff on similar projects regarding impervious cover questions. The critical area and the planning officer have made the decision that the vegetated areas are pervious. The applicant had the opportunity to document the path and get a decision from the planning officer during the process for the certificate of non-conformity. The applicant, or the staff recommends the path be removed. Recommendations: should the commission approve the final revision plat, staff recommends approval subject to the following condition. Address the June 10, 2020 TAC comments from the Department of Planning and Zoning, Department of Public Works, Environmental Health Department, Talbot Soil Conservation District, and Critical Area Commission prior to final plat submittal.
Thank you. Sean?
Good morning. Related to the original code matter, we're happy to be approved under the original code and not actually have 190. And the major component of that was that the family.
Can I hold you up? Mr. Boycourt, can you hear Mr. Callahan okay?
I did not, sorry.
Yep. So Sean, I'm going to ask you to pull the mic close and speak just a little bit louder.
Okay. The question about the original code related to the staff condition, we are very happy to continue under the original code. The family was involved in the discussions about the Bellevue master plan, and the current code has some architectural conditions. For instance, the way a driveway can face, or the way a garage can be oriented. There's a lot more review components under the current code than under the former code. And the family did not want to be restricted to the extent that the new code requires. So they opted out of the new code. Generally, the project is compliant with the new code, but under the old code, they have more flexibility. And they recognized that early and decided to write that letter to be reviewed under the old code. Related to lot numbering, it is sort of confusing the way the old plats of record are labeled with section and lot, but the legal agreements that have been written follow the current plat. It is a numbering system that works, it's identifiable, it is clear. There's a different way to do it, but I guess, the way that we had presented at sketch and preliminary, we followed through to final. And there's probably 30 hours of work involved in putting these legal agreements together. They're presented in final format. We like to keep the plat and the legal agreements as they are now. Related to the path and the buffer, we had submitted in May of 18 a certificate of non-conformity request to the county. And there was a lot to talk about with this project when it first hit the books here. 32 old lots of record, several rights of ways to be amended, various piers. It was a complicated site. There was an additional certificate of non-conformity request submitted by the applicant's attorney. And the second certificate of non-conformity application was responded to formally, but the lane certificate of non-conformity somehow fell by the wayside. The lane certificate of non-conformity, which I have here for you, did document the existence of the road and the block structure. And I'll talk about the block structure in a second. But the history of this site is that the Shell Island that's on the plat was a former seafood factory. And yes, this is just across the road from the Mark Hill site that we talked about before. So all the working waterfront connotations and history of seafood processing is right now on these properties where the history of Talbot and other surrounding counties where seafood business was very important. It was here. The family has requested that they be able to keep that path on the plat. And I think it's as much a historical context as anything. But let me ask you to hand these out, and we'll just look it over. One of the concerns is that the road and path have been in existence since the property was purchased by the current owner's grandparents. The history of the property in Shell Pile is that it was a commercial use and seafood packing house. And as you flip through the pictures, you'll see the applicant's family members in the pictures actually standing on the road, and you can see the smaller, older workboats in the afterground there that are actually up in this code that are served by this path, which used to be a road. Sometime in the early 70s, the county actually bought or acquired part of the applicant's land to build the formal ferry dock complex that's there, and then pinched off the access that used to be able to access Pier 1 and the shell pile, and that road or path was the only way to get down to that little Pier number 1. So it is still in use today. The applicant uses it to get down to Pier 1. When folks want to go crabbing in a small boat, that's where they drive across the lawn or path to get the 6 gallons of gas down to the little dock. I suppose there's no real regulation against driving across your own lawn to get down to the pier. But, you know, the historical context of this road is significant. One of the options that the applicant wanted to consider was to approach the county about getting a gate through from the county landing to Pier number 1. If the Planning Commission and staff are not able to allow us to leave the road or to drive across the lawn, we could maybe approach the county to get a gate in the county fence to be able to get to Pier number 1. But, you know, I don't think it's totally out of the realm of consideration to allow the road to remain. You know, I think it's a family concern. The intent is that these lots all be sold to one developer, and the developer will build the road and reshape the lots and install the utilities. And, you know, this will be a nice waterfront component, but a residential subdivision. And the family's going to, you know, dispose of the land and let a developer do the heavy lifting. There's a fair amount of grading that has to occur. There's a wetland permit proposed that is required to build Shell Mill Avenue and raise that road a little bit. There's a $10,000 wetland mitigation fee that has to be paid to get that permit issued. So there's still more work to do. But if you read the certificate of non-conformity request of May 1st, 2018 in my package to you, items 5 and 6 on page 2 talk about the dirt path and the block pump house. The next page is the 1972 critical area wetland map that I've circled in red there that shows the path. And then the pictures, specifically picture 10 and 31. Show the road that is the subject of the dirt path discussion. There are also, in the staff report, refers to the TAP comments. If you look on page 3 of 5 of the subdivision plat, look at lot E1. You see the pump house, 149 square feet,
I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan, could you tell us what map you're looking at again?
sheet 3 of 5.
And we're talking about our original packet or what you sent us?
Now, the original package.
3 of 5,
That's the
okay.
subdivision plat.
Got it?
You look at the end of Lincoln Road,
Yes?
see the pump house
Yes.
on lot E1.
Yes.
Okay. That is item 6 in my May 1st certificate of non-conformity request. The county has asked that that be removed prior to final plat. We'd like to leave it remaining. And I'm not sure that I might have to add or come back for an additional waiver request to the planning commission. But the county, the applicant has already removed a large open shed that was on what is now section D, lot 1, which is adjacent to the main house. And the applicant has spent about 3 years and a heck of a lot of money to get to this point. And they really don't want to have to remove that block building. They'd rather leave that for a future buyer to remove. The county has asked that it be removed. I don't see that leaving that block building there for a future owner to deal with is a significant burden to the county to just leave it there for another year or two. I recognize that it's a structure prior to the principal, but we did ask for it back in May of 18, but something falls into cracks. I don't really have a problem with the fact that it didn't get addressed until now, but we'd like to be able to leave it and not have to remove it.
So Sean, I have visited the site, I saw the building, I didn't go in. Is there a deep well in the building? In other words, so convince me that it's a big deal to move that small structure.
Yeah, no. If you look on the plat, it says water supply well abandoned by licensed well driller 6/8/18. I mean, I asked this family specifically if it was a big deal to remove this at this time, and they said, do what you can to have it left because we don't want to have to remove it. I said, okay, I'll make the point to the planning commission. So that's what I'm doing. The one other comment that I'd like some consideration on, one of the conditions of the TAC comment is that the wetland fill be placed prior to CRM. You see you've got a nice even line around the back of lot A, section A, lot 6. You come down Shell Mill Avenue and you're driving towards the water. The last 3 lots on the right have some wetlands on them. Lot A4 and lot A6 have building envelopes at the rear of the lots, such that if you look on the existing conditions plan, we have to fill some of those wetlands to be able to get these building areas. The county TAC comments request that we do the wetlands fill prior to coming to CRM, which is right before you record the final plat. As I said before, the family intends to sell this to a developer who's going to do all the mass grading. I mean, right now on the ground, you could build a house up on the roadfront lots on Poplar Lane. But really, the way this ground rolls and due to the work that's happened in the past, there needs to be a fairly significant amount of mass grading to happen all at once to get things to work correctly. And we really rather not have to do this fill to get the final plat approved. We recognize that it has to be done to make the subdivision work and drain and be buildable. But we'd rather do that after final plat when all of the mass grading of the project occurs and not do it prior to CRM. And I seem to think that the county's comments to date had the wetland permit in hand prior to CRM. And maybe I've just been misreading it for 2 years, and it's always said, do the wetland fill prior to CRM. But we agreed to have the wetland permit prior to CRM, but we don't want to do the construction of the wetland fills prior to CRM.
So while you're on that point, Sean, someone from the county want to comment on that? In other words, is the county looking for the permit to be in hand or for the wetland to actually be filled?
think it was their, I think it was their desire to have the wetlands filled, but I think we could work with the applicant, if they wanted to post a bond or do something like that to, to postpone the wetland fill as long as they have the permit.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we're very happy to include a grading number in the stormwater management bond to ensure grading of the site occurs as part of the project, but it would make things a lot easier to manage if grading happens after the final plat is approved as part of the entire site project rather than before the plat was recorded.
Elisa, would you like to comment on the pathway? You've heard from the applicant. Would you like to comment further on that?
Well, the pathway was used for the Marina and oyster operation that no longer exists. Out in the field, the pathway doesn't really exist. It's vegetated, it's overgrown. It kind of stops at where the tidal outfall is near pier number 2. We really don't see, this plat really doesn't have, they never disclosed to us until now that, the reason why they wanted to keep the path. We're still not really sure why they want to keep the path. It goes over 2 lots, and dead ends at the county landing. We're just not sure we can accommodate this request.
Right. Gotcha.
Mr. Council and Planning Commission, right now, you see Orchard Terrace as it extends down to serve lots 80 and unnamed lot 1. If you look at sheet 3 to 5.
Okay, Sean, I'm on 3 of 5. Can you start over then?
You see Orchard Terrace, which is all the way to the left-hand side of the sheet.
Yes.
Orchard Terrace extends down to serve lots 80 and unnamed lot 1. Right now, unnamed lot 1 is forested. There's a lot of trees there. You can't physically get down to the pier number 1 from Orchard Terrace. There's trees in there and it's like a jungle. So the only way to get to pier number 1 right now is via the path to drive across section D lot 1. And like I said, I don't think there's any problem with driving across your own lawn to get to your own pier, but there is a practical matter here of being able to get to pier number 1. It's likely that, section D lot 1 and the unnamed lot 1 will be owned by different people in the future. But right now, they're all owned by a family. And this historic road is the access to pier number 1.
Okay, Sean, help me out. I'm struggling here. I see a road that starts nowhere and goes to Pier 1, but there's got to be something in the back of somebody's mind other than, I'm not getting it. So help me.
If you read points 1 through 1 through 7, highlighted on the package I just gave you, those are the family's points of discussion. And they're rationale for requesting that we leave the road on the plat. I don't think there
Sean,
is
can you
any,
summarize those, because I don't have the particular document, so. Thank you.
And it would help for Mr. Boycourt's benefit as well. Obviously, he doesn't have access to this.
I'll just read them quickly.
Yep.
The road and path have been in existence prior to my grandparents taking ownership of the entire property. The history of the property and shell pile, as originally referenced, then after being renamed by the planning board, was a commercial use. There was a working processing seafood plant for agriculture processing and production of fertilizer on that site. In the early 70s, with the exchange of part of our land for an expansion and renovation of the public marina and ferry dock, that diminished our access from the public side and increased the importance and continued use of the existing shell path/road to access our docks and continued use of the cove to tie up our boats. The cove was actually marina zoned at one time, and evidently my grandfather had an option to continue that use, but did not renew it because it was only our family using the docks and cove area. There is an oyster shell foundation to that roadbed, and there is a layer of sediment now on top from time. If you dig down 2 inches, you find oyster shells. I've attached a photo of the shell paved road from the early 1900s, clearly showing an existing shell road and industry that used to be part of Shell Island. That said, the road and path, or whatever you wish to label it, has been in existence for a long time. With the placement of the chain link fence from the county along the Marina roadway going to the water's edge for commercial access for loading and unloading, and to help keep everyone from tossing trash on our property and trespassing, and without a gated entrance on that side to allow us access, the closure and continued use of the cove area would be harmful for our use. The continued use by my family members that are commercial licensed watermen and the future owner of either of those 2 lots will own the right for access. Unless the county will allow us to install a gate to access the cove area through the chain link fence area to access our property, the only access we will have will be through the existing shell road and path that we have been using since we took ownership. There is no master plan of what's going to happen with Shell Island. There's historic use of this road, and I think the county would like, the applicant would like to leave it on the plat so that its historic significance is recognized, and to what degree it is used in the future or goes away with time is something that we'll have to see. But I think it's clearly evident that it is a historic feature of the site, fairly well documented. We did request the county to confirm the existence in May of 18. I didn't follow up on the request. I thought it was in the non-conformity letter. It wasn't. Similar to the block building concern. These are all seemingly minor matters, but they're important to the family. So that's
Yep.
why
Gotcha.
I'm bringing it up.
So Lisa, on this shell path, as you stated, it's overgrown with grass and everything else, so you're not asking for physical removal, you're just asking to take it off the plat. Is that correct? Correct. Gotcha. Okay. All right, good. Anything further, Sean?
I don't think so. Thank you very much.
Commission members, Commissioner Boycourt, do you have any questions or comments at this time?
No, I followed the discussion pretty well. Thank you, John, for getting the microphone. I'm not, I look at the future here and that clearly that the pump house has to go if somebody wants to buy that. I'm not uncomfortable with the grading of lot A6 further, seaward until, so I'm in favor of postponing that rating. But with regard to Pier 1, the way it's configured now, it's going to be a relic, in my opinion, as soon as D1 is sold. And I think that leaving that on the plat is a messy planning issue here. That clearly the family can use it now if they take it off, if the line is taken off the plat. But for future purposes, it makes no sense, in my opinion, to have that road there and go into the setback area or the pathway to go into, even though there's a historical shell road there to go to Pier 1. I think Pier 1 is I'm not in favor of taking it out, but I'm not in favor of, I don't think it's a viable long-term pier for the community or for the neighboring properties, frankly.
So Sean, quick question, you've dealt with this. So is it easier for someone to replace an existing pier as opposed to getting a permit for a new pier? In other words,
It is easier to replace an existing pier. It's a building permit matter of the county as opposed to a core MDE permit.
gotcha. So my guess is that's probably one of the reasons they prefer to leave it rather than take it out, just because it's, yeah, gotcha. Yeah, okay. Commissioner Stranahan?
I agree with what Commissioner Boycourt had to say overall. Also, my comment mostly has to do with the roadway. I like what Commissioner Boycourt said, that it is a historically there has been a roadway there. I know I'm parsing things here, but to say it's historic has a little different connotation, because I don't know that it has any, in my feeling of the word, historic value to the county or to preserving the history of the area. If it has been allowed to be overgrown, it seems that the road, to me, has been abandoned or the pathway has been abandoned for quite a while. And as was pointed out earlier, the family or whoever future owners of the property are could still drive their car, their pickup truck, whatever, across their property, even where that pathway had been, to get to their pier, the end, to take gas to the crab boat, whatever. So I don't have an issue with the pier remaining, particularly from what Callahan said about being able to replace it sometime in the future without going, since it's already existing. But the roadway is keeping that on the plat, I think, could be troublesome sometime in the future, because you don't know what someone else is going to interpret that a few years from now and potential uses that they may want to put it into.
Commissioner Guzzi?
Yes, I have 3 concerns. Regarding the piers, concerns/questions. Regarding the piers, I'm unclear as to which property they're going to convey with. I understand that we're being asked for a waiver. It seems that Pier 2 would convey with Section D, Lot 1, and I'm uncertain as to what Pier 1 would convey with, possibly the unnamed lot.
That's correct.
Okay. So since that is correct, the latter, the pathway, I'm understanding that you need the pathway to access Pier 1, and yet from Lot 1. But if it's going to convey with unnamed Lot 1, then Pier 1 would not require that pathway.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not really an access issue then?
Well, I guess when you've owned something for 50 or 60 years, and you don't know exactly when you're going to divest of the holding, you want to be able to get from here to there. And the concern is, the family has always had use of that. And if someone makes you take it off a plat. Maybe you don't have use of it. So I think that's what we're feeling here.
I appreciate that, Mr. Callahan. My second point is that I actually have a concern with both piers. I did not walk on Pier 1, but I did walk on Pier 2, and from a distance, Pier 1 did not look very safe. Pier 2 is very unsafe. My concern would be how long will they remain this way? Obviously, if someone were to go onto this property, they would be trespassing if they didn't have permission, but, you know, if a child were to play on that, I mean, I would be very concerned. So if we are to accept the waiver and keep them on the plat, I would recommend that there be some consideration for a preventative entrance. Perhaps, I hate to say it because I prefer not to have these things, but like a fence that might prevent someone from going on to that pier because it is fairly unstable. At least my own opinion. I'm not an expert in this area. And then my third point, on the fill, I guess it's more of an understanding. This has been, Mr. Flo, this decision to fill the area, what exactly is being filled on this?
If you look on sheet 2 of 5,
Okay.
it shows the existing shape of the wetlands that exist on the existing lots.
Okay.
And if you look at 3 of 5, it shows you the proposed shape of the wetlands on the proposed lots. So you can see the fill. Basically, we're just taking off the tip of the wetland there and filling as needed for grading for the house pad.
So if I understand you correctly, Mr. Callahan, then on this, the second drawing, you see section D, lot 2, and section D, lot 1 on the second page, and on the fourth page, you see that as being a lighter dotted wetland area. Is that being filled in?
The wetland on lot A3 and A4 on sheet 2 is being filled in to provide more buildable area.
I see the point piece of it. It's a bit craggedy on the page 2.
Yeah, basically we're filling that point.
Just that point. Okay, nothing more toward the water on page 2.
Only some of the wetland in the road right of way on Shell Mill going south on the lots, future lots A6. We need to crown the road and bring it up a little bit to get it out of the flood, above the flood elevation. So as you bring the road up and fill a little bit beyond the existing road, which is going to have a little bit of wetland impact there.
Okay. And then, Mr. Counsel, if I might ask, could we be looking at this, voting on it in the different sections as opposed to a block?
Sure.
We are voting on this, yes?
If we decide to,
If we
yes.
decide to vote on it, yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Mr. Callahan.
Commissioner Stevens?
So legally, with the road, the Shell Road showing on the map, does it legally give anyone right away through that property if section D, lot 1 sells?
Only if it's written in specifically. If there's intent to provide a right of way, it would have to be described.
So if we took that off the map, but didn't require them to actually physically remove the pathway, what is the concern? I mean, once they sell that lot, they're going to lose that access.
That's correct.
So if we vote today just to remove it from the plat, but not have to physically remove it or cover it up. Does that alleviate their concern, or do they still have
I think
concern?
that alleviates the county's concern.
Does that alleviate their concern? I just don't understand their concern, like if they sell
Well,
that.
I think it's, they think something being taken away from them, it's taken off the plat. I don't know to what degree that is completely accurate, but, when Elisa says the road is overgrown, you can drive in your car today. The grass has grown back over the travel surface.
Yeah, my concern's not about if it's overgrown or, passable. I mean, my concern is, as we set this up to, they are giving something up by, making the changes and selling a piece of the property. And to set this up to sell it, leaving it on the map, as they're concerned that it's gonna give them heartache.
Yeah, but
I'm concerned
But I
that if we
think,
leave it on the map, it's gonna give us a lot of
our
heartache.
decision as opposed to having the county make the decision for us. That's what
Right. Well, it's just, I by no means will vote to say they have to physically remove the roadway. To me, if I was buying that property, I would want that, in my mind, I would want that ability to say, I want that pathway, or if I bought the property, I could say I want to remove it. But to leave it on the plat is where I'm having difficulty. I want to give them I want them to use that road and to stay, their family businesses to use it and to make it easy for them as possible. But when we're setting this up to, at some point in the future, sell that lot, I do have some concern about leaving it as dots on the map, but I don't have any desire or intention to make them physically remove it or stop using it until they sell it. I'm leaning on the pump house. Seeing that, it doesn't seem like that's a large financial burden to remove that, and to leave something on the property like that. I do have some concern with also that I would need some more explanation to why it shouldn't come off now instead of leaving it. And for the county, is there an option, or would there be an option of giving a gate access to Pier 1 for the commercial water main usage, or is that not an option? Has that been discussed with the family, or has that been discussed, or has that just been thrown out today?
That was just provided today, so we have not had the opportunity to review that formally. But I don't think that would necessarily be a decision that's made by the planning office alone.
Mhm.
I think that would also involve Parks and Recs that runs that area, as well as county manager and possibly county council, to assist in making that decision whether that's appropriate.
Okay. So, Elisa, in the staff comments, one of the comments was to revise the lot numbers for consecutive identifier. Can you comment on that a little further?
Well, the lots have various cumbersome long names. So we were thinking, we talked about it at TAC, if they, were consecutive, we felt like this would just be easier all along to have R1A, R1A for Section A, revised Lot 1. So it would just be shorter, less cumbersome identifier.
So, Sean, quite honestly, I think most of the plats we see are numbered in some kind of consecutive order to some degree. Can you convince us that this was done for a reason?
Well, it follows the historic plats. Section A, Lot 4 is just a combination of lots that it follows the historic plat.
Gotcha, okay.
And we got the final in this condition, and wrote all our legal agreements, et cetera.
Okay.
They're all set.
So what you're saying is, and I think this was something new that just came up instead of, because I think you've been dealing with it, what, at least 2 years, maybe longer.
Right.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Okay. So the pump house, I know the family uses that for recreational purposes. There are a number of them, and it doesn't matter. But is that something they might keep, like a crab trap or life jacket? Or in other words, is there some type of storage in it, or do you know if the building
I
is
do not know.
Okay. Okay.
When you're done, I'd like to comment on some of those things.
Great. Yep. Okay. Great. Okay. Yep.
I just want to first comment on the May 2018 request of planning officer. This is really the first I've heard that we haven't responded to that particular request to planning officer. So I certainly would encourage you to resubmit that, and we will address each of those things that's in that particular thing, in that
Okay.
particular
Can you?
request.
I'm sorry. I'm not following. On what?
Sean had stated that he submitted in May of 2018 a request to planning officer that addressed the piers and the path and the pump house
Yep.
specifically.
Gotcha.
So I did not know that that was still waiting for a response. So if he could resubmit that and list those particular things, we would definitely provide a specific response on those. I think moving forward today, part of that request may have been about the piers, which the Planning Commission does have the ability to grant a waiver of the piers being located on a property that does not have a primary structure. The Planning Commission does not have the authority to make a decision on the pump house. You can make a recommendation that it be removed, or you can make a recommendation that maybe they keep it. But under the code for an accessory structure
Okay.
that's on a unimproved parcel, the only thing that we allow is the storage, and that's by a special exception to the Board of Appeals. So if they wanted to go through the special exception process and take that from a pump house to a storage building, then they could do that through the Board of Appeals special exception.
Gotcha. Okay.
And just in regard to the dirt path, consistent with what has been said, that path does not exist as a path as drawn here. You know, there's a lot of historic pictures that have been provided, but unfortunately it doesn't provide a picture from today. That a large portion of the path as shown is overgrown with grass. We're certainly not saying that they cannot use that or continue to access the pier in whatever manner they want, but it needs to be reflective of what is actually on the ground today. And on the ground today, there's only a small portion of that path that truly exists that you can see that it's a pathway. We certainly have no problems with, while this remains under their common ownership, even though it's subdivided into lots, how they access, how they cross, they can drive across any of these lots, you know. But when unnamed lot 1 is improved with a residential structure, we will work with that property owner in how they are requesting or need a path through the 100-foot buffer to access Pier 1, which will be on their lot. If the desire, as kind of stated by Sean, is that the better access to the shell file is through Section D, Lot 1, maybe there needs to be some consideration of reconfiguration so that that shell file stays with that lot versus the unnamed lot. It certainly is a better lot to make unnamed Lot 1 have that waterfront access. But if the better access to that particular area is potentially through Section D, Lot 1, maybe there should be some reconsideration for the configuration.
So you're saying the pump house is out of the purview of the Planning Commission. How about leaving the dirt path on the plat? Is that something that we didn't know?
That's a condition that the planning office has requested that they take that off.
Right.
The Planning Commission supports either conditions that we do or not. You know, so
Yep. Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So I guess at this time I would ask you if there are any comments or questions from either anyone in the audience or that are accessing us remotely.
Okay, Vincent, do you have any questions?
Hey, this is Jack Payne, one of the family members, the Rook family. The interpretation of that roadway as it's being used now by the dock is subject to everybody's different interpretation. My two sons have commercial waterman license. They unload oysters, they unload fuel, they load up oysters. My whole point is you try to haul 20, 30, 40 bushels of oysters from that cove around to the area where a pickup truck would be without either gated access or use of that path. You'll find out how much work a lot of these watermen go through. The only reason why we want to keep that continued use is part of what we had discussions here over the last few years about working waterfront. It keeps it attractive. If somebody secures that lot or both lots, it would maintain it as working waterfront. And if they do not use it, it still gives the property owners options to be able to lease it out to watermen. So I don't, the interpretation of the board as to the use of that path, I absolutely disagree with your interpretation. And Mary Kay, you've actually pointed out the fact that we may not be able to get a gated entrance from the public roadside. And the level of difficulty will be to be able to go through that fence to be able to access it. If it came down to where we could grant access for the unnamed lot to Pier 1, which I don't have any of the diagrams in front of me, it could be a right-of-way easement or it's something granted by that lot that is the other waterfront lot that ends Pier 2. It could be that it never gets used beyond the point of the sale of the property. But the point is to keep those options open for those either two lot owners or maybe one person buying both those lots to be able to have those options in place. That was the only reason why I was arguing that. The existing pump house itself was there prior to us owning the property. The expansion tank that used to service the well that we had there at the cottage was in that pump house. We have now put a new well in the, that as a requirement, that was something not discussed, but as a requirement, we're reconfiguring the lots. We've had to put in a new well over for the cottage with the existing artesian well that's over on that other lot to remain. That expansion tank serves that well that's in that pump house.
Okay.
If we need to remove the pump house, then we need to remove the pump house. But just as a point of information, the existing expansion tank that is in that pump house is utilized by that other well that we have temporarily abandoned and will be a benefit to the new property owner when they go and install a house there. That's the only point that I have to make. But Mary Kay, you've already pointed out clearly how difficult it's going to be to get a gated access, to be able to access the first pier over on Shelby Island. And as far as the overall safety issues that with those two docks, we repair those over time. We have been using it since 1965. We have had gone through, I had 36 first cousins just on my mother's side. We've had those family members use it and their children using it. So as far as safety concerns, we've been down on the property. We watch our own children. Right now it's not open to the general public. Once these lots transfer, then it may be up to them to get new permits to be able to rebuild those docks as they see fit. So I've said my piece. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Thank you. We appreciate that. That helps. Yeah. Okay. Further comments or questions?
This is Susan Payne, and I'm one of the owners, and what I'd like to do is, if at all possible, is say for the family, is that we would like to leave the pump house in place and let someone else, it's a safe structure, it's a cinder block structure, it's hurting nothing. We'd like to leave it in place, as Ben said, it does have an expansion tank, it will help with the person who buys the lot. And it's not something that's a safety hazard by any means. We can certainly store things in there, but the point is, it would be possible, if there's any way possible that you can give us a waiver on that. We've been working on this project between the hearing and everything that's gone on with the county since at least 2017. It's been really a long, very costly thing for 10 of us. There are several who can't even pay their share anymore. It's dragged out so much. To change any numbers, to take the pump house off, or anything like that would be a real hardship for the family. That's all.
Yep, thank you, yes. Okay. And anything further? Okay. What is the desire of the commission at this point? I guess I would first ask, Mr. Boycourt, do you have any further questions or comments?
No, and Paul summarized my thought with regard to the lane. And with regard to the piers, given what the testimony was, I'm in favor of keeping the piers, giving a waiver to those both piers, and having it resolved the same as the person buying the property. So I'm in favor of taking the Shell road off the Plat. It won't change a thing, and with regard to the county's use. And the pump house, I'm either way with it. I support the desire of planning to take it off, simply because it doesn't represent a good lot for sale.
Right. Okay. Any other commissioners like to make a comment before we move forward?
No further comment.
Yep. Commissioner Desi?
I have a question for Ms. Verdery. If they do resubmit the May 1st, 2018 letter for a certification of legal nonconformity, what exactly I'm trying to separate that from what we would be voting on today. What would you be looking at? I've been rereading this letter. I just want to make clarification. And then how does that compare or contrast with what we would ultimately vote on today?
I'd have to see the specific letter and what particular topics they're requesting, the certificate of nonconformity. Just in general, if we were looking at the pump house, we would have noted that because that pump house was put on a separate lot, which the numbers would be different from what you see here because there's a lot of records. We would have said that those lots were combined for zoning purposes and that they could not be subdivided or they could not have the separate pump house on one property that serves a separate lot. The particular note on the plat today says that the water supply well was abandoned by a licensed well driller. Today's the first I heard that there is still the expansion tank located in that structure that serves the new well that was drilled. So that still creates an issue for me, whether these two lots would be merged for zoning purposes.
Actually, I'm just going to butt in just for a second.
Sure.
That's incorrect.
Sure.
The new well that was done for the cottage has its own expansion tank in the cottage. The previously replaced well that pump house covered, which has been filled, expansion tank for that artesian well, which is outside of that building, is still within that building. Couldn't that be a condition of issuance of any building permit? And can that be noted on the plat copy? That would be removed prior to the issuance of any building permit on that lot?
I would have to have a
Sorry,
conversation with environmental health to determine what exactly is there and what it serves and whether it would be able to remain or not. So I think that's a question that would involve
Yep.
a conversation.
And then again, as we've heard, that's not under the purview of the planning commission today anyway, so that's something that Mary Kay, you're gonna have to work out with the applicant and environmental health. So we'll let that one,
Okay.
we'll let that one lie.
And then as far as the piers, you do have the authority to grant that waiver if you desire to allow a pier to remain on property without the primary dwelling. That's specifically in
Yeah.
the zoning ordinance. And then the path, it's a recommendation by the planning office because the physical path does not exist as shown on here. And as noted by Commissioner Spies, we have a concern with if you show it like this, what does it represent moving forward with any access rights from one lot to the next lot as it's currently shown? And we have not asked that any pathway that's remaining there should be removed.
Right.
And we're not saying that they cannot continue to access across those lots
Right.
under their common ownership.
Would you like to comment on the numbering of the lots as well?
So, as you can see, there's section A, B, C, D, and even an unnamed lot 1. So it's difficult when we say lot 1 to figure out what is lot 1, because we have so many different sections. So it was just easier and consistent with the plots that we currently do today to have 1 through however many lots there are today. Something that's consecutive versus multiple lot 1s.
So you stand behind the staff and that you would like to see that?
We would like to see that. It's up to the planning commission whether they support that recommendation or not.
Yeah.
We think that would certainly be easier in moving forward with identifying a lot.
Okay.
There was a lot of concern when you just say lot 1, having so many sections that represent a lot 1.
Okay.
One question, Mary.
May I put a comment in just for a second, please?
Sure.
From an abstract standpoint, from issuing title insurance, I think the proper references are there to be able to track back the ownership of those properties through the past deed. I understand the renaming of it, but each lot will be renamed when a property address is given to it as a proper reference. But to go back through the legal descriptions of previous deeds and through previous recorded subdivisions or creation of those lots, they have to have the correct, proper reference for being able to do a proper abstract and to be able to guarantee title on this property. My apologies for interrupting, but
No, I think it's
I do
important.
disagree with that.
Yeah, I think it's important that we come to a conclusion one way or the other, so that's helpful. Sean?
And could I?
Sure. Commissioner Guzzi?
You want to go to the numbers? Because I wanted to address the path for a second. So you want?
Yeah, let's finish the numbers and then we'll go to the path. Sean?
I thought about it.
Okay.
Okay.
Back to the path. If the path were requested legal nonconformity, is that what you would be doing, Mr. Callahan? Just so I'm going down the right path here? No pun intended.
I'm done with that.
But I'm asking a question, Ms. Verdery. If in this legal nonconformity certification, would you be asking that the path be certified as a legal nonconforming path?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Verdery, then if they do resubmit this May 1st letter asking for the legal nonconformity certification of the path, you would at that point determine whether or not it is legally certifiable. And you would come to that decision based on new information, or do you already have all the information? Would you be looking at additional aerial photographs, etc.?
I think the applicant has provided significant historic information related to the existence of this path. But the code does say for a non-conformity, if it has been abandoned for a period of 12 months, then it loses its their ability for legal non-conforming status. I think recent aerial photos and looking at the property today, the path does not exist to the extent as shown. They may use it that way. They may drive over the grass and the features and the vegetation that has grown up today. But as a physical path, I don't think that has existed in the past 12 months in the configuration as shown on the plan.
Thank you.
Okay.
We
So,
actually use that path on a regular basis.
yeah.
It is not a principal residence for somebody occupied full time. Most family members come down on the weekends. Now, whether it's torn up and showing tire tracks, we try to actually tread light because we do not want to disturb the environment. But we still use that path to access where the docks are, be able to load and unload if necessary.
So,
I disagree with your assessment of it not being used within the last 12 months.
okay, well, so my opinion on the path is, no one's gonna make you remove it, against your own wishes. It's a line on paper, that quite honestly, as a commission member, if we were to see something further, on this project, whether that's a community pier, whatever, the existence of that path would have no bearing on my decision as to whether that was the best access point to that community pier. In other words, I quite honestly, my personal opinion is it's a line on paper that in the future, for me, has no meaning. It's, you know, I understand it's an old road, I understand it's there. Nobody's saying, as far as everybody's concerned, you know, you're willing to drive across, or you have the right to drive across your lot in any manner that you wish to access the waterfront. And there's nothing to say that. So I think we've talked about that, and we'll see how it shakes out. So what I'd like to do is talk to the commission about how we want to handle this. My suggestion would to break it down into 4 sections. First would be a pier waiver. Second would be a recommendation to the planning officer on the path. Third would be, and I'm not sure we need this, so I'll ask Mary Kay, a recommendation to the planning officer on the wetlands, whether it needs to be filled before final, or if it's okay, as Lisa suggested, to go with just a bond or whatever.
We would certainly appreciate your recommendation on that.
Yep, okay.
In your opinion.
Okay, and then fourth, I guess, would be final plat, motion or vote on the final plat as it stands. Does that seem reasonable, practical, logical, and all those good things, Mary Kay?
And on the last point, that includes the numbering, is that
It would
correct?
include the number, correct, yes. Yeah. Okay, so is that agreeable to the commission? Okay, so let's start with the pier waiver, and we would entertain a motion either way on that.
I would move that we approve the pier waiver with all staff conditions included.
Okay.
I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to grant the pier waiver as requested by Commissioner Stranahan, a second by Commissioner Gezzi. Is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, Miguel, would you take the vote?
Sure. Commissioner Boycourt,
Aye.
Commissioner Stranahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Gezzi,
Aye.
Commissioner Spies,
Aye.
and Chairman Council.
Aye.
Motion passes
Okay,
unanimously.
so we have granted the pier waiver. Second would be a recommendation to the planning officer in regards to the path.
I make a recommendation to the planning officer that they remove the path from the plat with no requirements to physically remove the plat from the property.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Spies and a second by Commissioner Boycourt to remove the path from the plat only. Would be the line on the paper is removed, nothing physical on the property is removed. Okay.
Commissioner Boycourt,
Aye.
Commissioner Stranahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Gezzi,
Aye.
Commissioner Spies,
Aye.
Chairperson Council.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so so we are recommending to the planning officer that the line on the paper of the path be removed. Our next is a recommendation to the planning officer in regards to the wetlands, and that would be whether the wetlands are to be filled before whatever, or if the bond is sufficient.
I move that we recommend to the planning officer that the wetlands be filled after the grading has been done with a bond posted.
Second.
Okay?
Is that
So we want to make sure we get this worded correctly, but it's my understanding that we have a motion by Commissioner Gezzi and a second by Commissioner Stranahan to postpone the actual filling of the wetlands until, Sean, help me out on the wording.
After the plat is recorded.
After the plat is recorded, and that would be secured by a bond. Is that the intent of the motion, Commissioner Gezzi?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Miguel?
Commissioner Boycourt,
Aye.
Commissioner Stranahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Gezzi,
Aye.
Commissioner Spies,
Aye.
Chairman Council.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. So the matter of the pump house that is remaining, we're going to leave that up to the planning officer and the applicant and environmental health to work out the details of that. We're not going to visit that today. Okay. So next would be final plat approval.
I move that we approve the plat as it stands with its current numbering system.
Are we gonna tie in the staff conditions?
Well,
With the staff, yes.
okay, so we have to be careful because the staff comments recommend revising the numbers, which the motion does not. And then also talks about the path, which we have just identified. So it would be, I assume your intent, Commissioner Gezzi, is to recommend plat approval with staff comment number 1, and then staff recommendations number 1 being complied with.
I'm just reviewing it. Give me
Sure,
a moment.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have not gotten a second yet.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Gezzi.
Does the motion include the previous decision on PAC as well?
It does,
Okay.
yes. That was it, yep. So we have a motion by Commissioner Gezzi, a second by Commissioner Spies to grant final plat approval with staff comment number 1 being complied with, that states that the applicant will need to ensure that the plat is consistent with the code. And then the recommendation 1 addressed the June 10th, 2020 TAC comment. It does include our previous recommendations in regard to peer waivers, the path, and the wetlands consideration. So with that, we're ready for the,
Commissioner Boycourt, Commissioner Boycourt,
Aye.
Commissioner Stranahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Gezzi,
Aye.
Commissioner Spies,
Aye.
Chairman Council.
aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay. Sean, thank you very much. I know it's been a long process for your applicant, and good luck moving forward. One thing I would like to note, just for the benefit of, I think is good, this letter is from the Maryland Department of Environment. It says the applicant has demonstrated minimizing impacts to the non-tidal wetland resources. So good job on that, Sean. Okay. Next on our agenda, the applicant is the Department of Planning and Zoning. The agent is Martin Skotsovich, our planner, and this is for our recommendation to the County Council on the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation easement application for fiscal year 2021. I'd like the record to note that I'm going to excuse myself from this portion of the record as we are involved in this program. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Commissioner Stranahan.
Mr. Sokolich, if you would like to go ahead and present everything to us. Thank you.
This is, we hope, is an annual process of approving applications that were taken by the county up to the now program for processing the eventual potential for acquisition of the easement for these farm properties. And is a process that Mel has been going on with for a good 40 years now. Their first easement was, one of their first easements was in Talbot County in 1980. And the program operates under a foundation which is administered by staff of the Maryland Department of Agriculture. And they have an arrangement where each individual county has a local program officer who is the middleman between the landowners and the foundation in order to acquire the development rights for these properties to preserve their utility and the major industry that agricultural and forestry is in Maryland. What I included for you in the packet last time, I have some other copies, is a list of the 12 applications of the 32 that we received this year that we would like to forward to the state for them to consider.
Do you have an extra copy of that? I have your other notes. I don't have.
I have copies of all these kind of things here. So there's we've got
I got a copy.
I gave you mine.
Rankings and all these kind of things. In any event, these are submitted in a rank order. One of the rules from the MAL program is that they have to decide how to acquire those easements. And they start with the one that has the greatest number of points in the ranking system that that county uses. Talbot County and most counties on the eastern shore at least use what they call a bare bones kind of ranking. It's just the facts kind of ranking. Most of the points on there come from soil conditions and soil quality. They rank that a couple of different ways, and there's over 200 of the 400 points involved in just how much Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 prime soils there are on that land. There are other points that have to do with best management practices that are in place on the farm. There are requirements that have to do with being in a priority preservation area, which is where the county and the state have decided they want to focus funds in order to have contiguous areas of agriculture preserved. And in a related sort of thing, there are a couple of numbers for the number of contiguous acres that are preserved, how much farmland adjoining the applicant farm is already enrolled in the program, and a regional 1 mile region, and how much is in the community that's preserved around that farm. So I had included a couple of past ranking sheets so you can see that this varies a little bit from year to year. In this previous round, the top ranking application had 392 points, 392.388 points to be exact. And in the current year, the top ranking is 372 and some digits points. So it's always highest to lowest within that group, but the numbers vary quite a bit, and sometimes they are very close to each other in ranking, a tenth of a point in some cases. So we are following the process and asserting that we're getting the best of what's available in agricultural land in this area. So the very short question is, looking at the list that we have provided you of the applications that we want to send up this time, would you make a recommendation to the county council that they look at it? It goes through a stepwise process with our local ag preservation advisory board looking them over, commenting them. It goes to the planning commission, asking you to do that now, and forward to the county, who will actually make the transmission, recommended transmittal of the applications to MAL, for them to go through their process, which will last till spring of next year before they begin to make offers on these applications. All things going right. We're in very strange times right now, budget-wise and everything else, but we're going ahead, not programming, committed to this all through this year and everything's going on.
Thank you, Martin. Are there any comments or questions from the commission?
I have a question on the 2020 names that were put forth and those that were actually awarded. Can you share that with us?
Well, for the 2020 rankings, we ended up so far just acquiring the number 2 ranked property on there, the Roy Brooks property. They're going through the process right now. They have not completed the easement yet. They're getting their survey work and other things done. That's going to end up being finished up with a survey, baseline survey is what it's called. We're required to go out there and look at the plan on the property as it is on the ground today, and establishing a historic baseline for when that easement was acquired here, or what the conditions were. There was buildings, there was land was treated like, and all those kinds of things. So they received their easement offer just before all this hit the ground. We would usually be able to work down through this list a little bit more and try to pick up some additional property with funds remaining and funds that we have retained. But we haven't gotten that far. We hope we're going to come back to that. In the year previous, there were 3 applications, and we're just finishing up on the paperwork for that right now. We hope to go to settlement on 3 farms for that easement a little bit later this summer. But so far, for that last year's round, the Brooks farm was the only one. It's a very good farm. There may not be too much more that comes after that, but this is, and the one after that, by the way, number 3, we had this overlap at the round, so Mr. Fisher actually accepted an offer from the previous year, actually, that they kind of crossed over in the paperwork, so he should have been eliminated. Well, he was passed over on that list. He was not made an offer, he wasn't eligible for an offer, but he's preserving his farm now, up on Talbot Road.
Anything else?
And just a quick question, the Barons, were they the ones that withdrew?
I'm sorry.
Is it Barons?
Gordon Barons?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did they withdraw?
They did, yes. And in a program, you have the opportunity to accept or reject an offer for cause or for no cause. There's no penalty to do it. You can come back and apply. And at that point, just wasn't ready to accept.
Well, thank you for providing the additional data since our last meeting.
Sure.
Councilman Spies.
I'm good, thank you.
Councilman Boycourt. Commissioner.
I have no comment other than thank Martin for this list. I'm always hiring us, wish we had more money.
Does staff have any questions or comments? At this time, I guess we're ready to entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we recommend to the county council to accept MALF, I guess it's a order applicant.
I'd like to make a motion that, if you can hear me, that we recommend to the county council approval of the list of MALF program 2021 easement applications as presented by Martin Snowbledge.
Second.
We've had a motion by Commissioner Boycourt and a second by Commissioner Spies, who tried to make the motion. But, so we're ready for a vote, please.
Commissioner Boycourt?
I'll vote for Paul's motion.
Commissioner Gezzi?
Aye.
Commissioner Spies?
Aye.
And Commissioner Stranahan?
Aye.
And the motion passes unanimously 4-0 with 1 abstention.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, applicant Talbot County Council, agent Mary Kay Verdery, planning officer, Department of Planning and Zoning, Bill 1446, a bill to amend Chapter 190 of the Talbot County Code to improve and clarify the process for license and oversight of short-term rentals in the county and to amend the standards for safety for rentals. Mary Kay?
I'm going to summarize for you the memorandum that was provided from Miguel on June 25th for Bill 1446. In the fall of 2018, the council adopted Bill 1401, which had significant changes to the short-term rental regulations. And in the summer of 2019, the council asked the short-term rental review board to undertake a review process and assess the progress of the legislation and implementation of the short-term rental program. In August and September of 2019, the short-term rental review board held 4 work sessions to gather public input and consider potential revisions and updates. During that period, they heard from over 40 individuals that came in and received over 90 letters associated with short-term rentals. So there was significant public input at that time. The short-term rental review board provided a letter with recommendations to the county council subsequent to those 4 work sessions. The council then held a joint work session with the short-term rental review board and county staff in December of 2019 and January of 2020 to discuss the board's recommendations. And the council took straw poll votes on the recommendations of the board and in a matrix that was provided to the Planning Commission. Bill 1443 was then introduced. Due to the COVID-19, that bill was allowed to expire, and subsequently the council introduced Bill 1446 that's before you today on June 9th, 2020. It was adopted by, or introduced by the council. We did provide a summary of the bill and the changes, so I'll go over those. Bill 1446 proposes to amend both Chapter 190, 3320 and 190, 63 of the Talbot County Code.
Mary Kay, if I could interrupt real quick. So this is included in the memorandum that you received this morning on the back. It was not included in our original packet, but if you want to follow along.
Unfortunately, we got probably the first side on what we provided in your package, so.
So it was provided this morning. So,
Yeah.
yep. Okay.
You should have that.
Yep, great, thank you. Go ahead.
So the bill provided code enforcement discretion on when and how long to apply a penalty that prohibits a property owner from applying for a license when they're found advertising or operating a short-term rental without such license. It clarifies the maximum number of persons to be permitted on site during periods of short-term rental use and are based on the number of bedrooms in the dwelling that is rented, either the primary or the accessory home. It establishes county-specific minimum building safety standards that the short-term rental home must meet related to fire extinguishers, smoke alarm, carbon monoxide monitors, rescue openings, primary and secondary emergency escape egress, and backup illumination for stairways with low ceiling heights. It allows third-party building safety inspections conducted by an International Code Council certified inspector to be completed prior to the filing of an application. It defines in detail the Talbot County Health Department's role in short-term rental license applications and reviews related to water sampling, testing, and property water supply, well, and on-site sewage disposal. It defines a resident agent and clarifies their role and responsibility when responding to complaints. It requires an STR licensed property owner to notify the county when there's a change in the resident agent status, and it eliminates the requirement for new applications that are only accepted during the months of January, February, July, and August. In addition, the bill proposes several changes to neighboring property owner notification requirements for short-term rental license. It eliminates one of the 2 current notifications and requires a short-term rental license applicant providing notice to neighboring property owners within 21 days of the date of the application. It changes the type of mailing from a certified mail to priority mail with delivery confirmation. Specific to the neighboring property owners, the mailing must be sent out at least 21 days before the scheduled public hearing for a new license application. It requires a short-term rental license applicant whose property has right of access on a private road to provide the neighboring property notification to all of the property owners who have right or access to such road, regardless of whether they're within the 1,000 or 500 foot requirement. It requires a licensed applicant whose property owner is within a certain zoning district to provide property owner notification of neighboring properties located within 500 feet, as opposed to the current 1,000 feet. So that's a summary of the specific changes, but I would certainly be glad to address any particular item within this and discuss that with the County Commission.
Sure. Commissioner Boycourt?
I appreciate the fact that the short-term rental review board and the county council had a work session, and a lot of this matrix that I see is really helpful to me. As you all know, I was not in favor of going forth with the idea of not a principal owner being a short-term rental review. We lost that idea, but with regard to suggested changes, I agree with everything except for number 15 with regard to how the county council voted. Number 15 says that they require the owner to be present at new application hearings. One of the specters that came up early on the short-term rental review board was having these monster corporations buy up the Eastern Shore and ruining neighborhoods. Well, you know, there was a lot of talk about that, and that calmed down a bit. But there is a concern, I think, about who the owner really is. If we don't have a principal owner residence as a requirement. And I think it's not a major imposition to have the county see the owner at the initial hearing and thereby indicate some idea on paper of who the owners really are, as opposed to a hidden LLC or some corporation, which I think is something we do not want on the Eastern Shore. We definitely don't want that. The neighborhoods are going to, presently, I think, under our present rules, are vulnerable to changes and ruining the neighborhood, or at least ruining the sense of community by having new people walking the street every weekend. So you've heard me on that, but I think number 15, I'm in favor of. Otherwise, I'm in favor with regard to how the council voted.
So Bill, one of the comments that we have received is, and comments, is that no other aspect of any other county permitting process requires the owner to be present, that they, you know, have the right to do that through an owner's agent. So how do we respond to that, you know, the short-term rental license is the only permit or application in the county that, you know, requires the owner's presence?
I actually have no trouble with the requirement, even though it does stand out separate from that. I think that it's a reasonable, I think the short-term rental issue about ownership is an important one. And I think that we, the short-term rental review board, county council, planning staff, and the rest of the county ought to be able to find out who the owners of these short-term rentals are. And there's multiple ways of finding that. So I personally have no trouble recommending that this is perhaps standalone requirement.
Okay, very good, very good. Commissioner Stranahan?
I agree with most of what Commissioner Boycourt said, and as off the top of my head, in response to Chairman Council's very insightful question, is that short-term rentals are a very different entity from the other licensed commercial applications, in my view, in the county, in that it seems to me we're sort of skipping through some zoning, whatever, we're allowing what is essentially a commercial operation to take place in a residentially zoned area, particularly in our town residential zoned areas, where we wouldn't allow an applicant for any other type of commercial license to take place in those areas.
Very good. Commissioner Gezzi?
I have one question and then one comment. In terms of Mr. Salinas's summary, and as Ms. Gregory presented it, just for clarification, there's the first section talking about what 1446 proposes, and then in addition what 1446 proposes several changes. Are those additional changes in response to what happened in the joint working sessions?
They are. The entire summary are changes in response to what happened during the joint work sessions. We just separated it in the memorandum so that the second set that starts with in addition all relates to neighboring property owner notification, but it all came out of the joint work sessions.
Okay, it's okay. All right, thank you. I would agree with what Mr. Boydcourt has laid out. Having yet another week to review all of the documentation and having attended some of the STR meetings a couple years ago, I know that there was a very, very strong voice in terms of the owner of the properties being rented. And there's a strong voice on both sides, and this is an issue, a very important county issue that I fear we don't have resolution or a meeting of the minds. I know that the county council's straw vote had voted 5-0, failing, allowing the short-term rentals to be the owner's principal residence. That does allow someone, an investor, example, to come in. But number 15, as Mr. Boydcourt points out, does help us to understand who the owner is and have them represent. It's a one-time showing. I don't think that that's unreasonable. I think that there were several safety issues that were nicely handled. Safety issues that were nicely handled in the joint work sessions and addressed and resolved, at least from my perspective. I do believe revisiting an article that former Commissioner of the Planning Commission, Jack Fisher, wrote. I think that our neighborhoods are vulnerable, and I think that we need to have a better meeting of the minds. So, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Spies?
Yeah, Bill and Bill did mention that, we've been through this process, and he said he lost. I think we just kind of came to an agreement that one side won out a little heavier than the other. I think we did come to some agreements, but I just have a hard time. I think it's not just vulnerability, but there's opportunity to be had in some of our struggling communities also. We have a very attractive community. We have some historical towns. We have some really nice communities, and done right, set up right, and if we continue to work as a community and organizations to come together to do this right, there's a right way to do this. There's, everybody has their horror stories, but there are some communities across the country that there are also some success stories that have done this well. I don't see I really don't see I don't see in my opinion how having the owner show up would be, in my mind, would be any more protection than having a well-respected agent represent them that we work with on multiple cases. These agents are going to build their reputation on projects and properties they represent. And, you know, it's not going to take too many black eyes for these agents that do these short-term rentals to totally lose face of the community and of the county and the planning and of the short-term rental board. So in my mind, the buyer, these agents are going to give us a level of protection also. You know, it's not a deal breaker for me, but, you know, I'm not convinced at this point that the owner needs to be there, and I do see some business opportunities for people to be owner agents. So I'm leaning in the other direction at this point.
Thank you. Yeah. So Mary Kay, my question is, in notices, in the cases, in other written notice, and I'm thinking special exceptions, variances, whatnot, are those requirements, the notification of neighbors, are they reduced in other zones from 1,000 feet to 500 feet, or is this a hybrid?
This is the only one that's reduced for that particular. The others do not have a reduction, but not all of them have 1,000 feet.
Okay. So I guess my comment would be, when I look out the window here and I look at what I think is 500 feet and what I think is 1,000 feet, and we look at the impact to the communities, I don't see the 1,000 foot requirement as being overly burdensome. It's a little bit more paperwork, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's important. Obviously, the short-term rental was probably the most contentious part when we redid our zoning ordinance, other than the chicken issue, which happily we got resolved. But the Planning Commission, we struggled with this. There's no other way to put it. We were trying to find a balance. And I think this has played out exactly as we had hoped it would. To set up a short-term rental review board, have them start the process, and then make modifications as we needed to. So I think the process is working. Is it perfect? Probably not. Will it ever be perfect and everybody be happy? Probably not. Are there things that Chip Council as a Planning Commission member wished had gotten included in Chapter 190? Absolutely. You know, nobody got everything. So, in regard to the owner showing up at the initial meeting, my bias was that being the only one, but quite honestly, sitting here and listening to our other three commission members that support that, and I'm sitting here thinking, you know, this does have a major impact on communities. And I think it is important that the owner realize the impact that they're having in these neighborhoods and own it and have the responsibility. So quite honestly, sitting here in the last 10 minutes, I've changed my mind on that. So that's probably what, I was happy to see in the bill that it did address some of the safety issues that we didn't feel like in Chapter 190 that we could in regard to that. So I'm satisfied. Obviously, that's a paramount concern to the commission as well as myself. So at this point, if no other commission members or staff members have...
Staff comment.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So at this time, we'll go ahead with the staff comments if we're ready.
In regard to the bill, the staff does have some suggested amendments, recommendations, just rereading it and having an opportunity to go through it.
Yep.
Specifically with the safety that you noted, we'll start with those. I'm going to provide you a written comments because they're a little long. I'll read it for the benefit of the public, but I'd like to provide you with a copy.
So Miguel, has this been sent to Mr. Boycourt? Does he have access to this? Could we take a picture and shoot it to him real quick?
Yeah, I'll do that,
Find
actually.
some way to get it
Actually,
to him?
that'll work.
Yep.
I can do that. Do you want me to do it?
Sure. Mr. Boycourt, so you're going to get a message from Commissioner Gezzi that'll help you follow along with this. Also, Mr. Chairman, while she's doing that, I just want to note that we do have here in attendance for any questions you may have, Brent Garner from Permits and Inspections, as well as Michael Dewell from Code Enforcement.
For the benefit of the public, I'll read these
So
suggested.
if you gentlemen would like to come forward, one at each table, if there's any questions, we'll be ready to go. Yep, okay. Sure.
And we did work with the building official in regard to these, they're supported by their attorney as well.
Just a
So,
moment.
in section C9, the short-term rental property,
Okay, so that would be on
Standard.
page 4 of the
page
bill.
4,
Yep.
that's correct. We're suggesting in section 9B that that language be amended to read that be equipped with interconnected smoke alarms in each bedroom, striking and within the immediate vicinity of the outside sleeping area, and amending that to say, outside each sleeping area in the immediate vicinity of the bedrooms and on each additional story of the dwelling, including basements and habitable attics. In section C, we're suggesting that that be amended to say have interconnected carbon monoxide alarms versus monitors installed within when fuel-fired appliances are present or the unit has an attached garage. Alarms shall be installed outside of each separate sleeping area in the immediate vicinity of bedrooms where a fuel-burning appliance is located within a bedroom or is attached or its attached bathroom. A carbon monoxide alarm shall be installed within the bedroom. Combination carbon monoxide alarm and smoke alarms shall be permitted to be used in lieu of carbon monoxide alarms. In section E, we are proposing that read have a primary emergency escape egress for each primary emergency strike escape exit and replace that with escape/egress. Continuing with the rest of the existing language, that the stairwell should be a minimum of 30 inches wide at the locations to include handrail height and a minimum height of 6 feet from the stairwell tread to the ceiling. In section G, we're proposing that read have a secondary strike exit, escape exit, replacing that with emergency escape egress, meeting the above standards on each upper floor. However, if no such secondary emergency escape egress meets the above standard, the secondary emergency escape egress shall be provided at the furthermost point of the primary emergency escape egress and may consist of an emergency roll-up ladder for the use of an exit to exit a rescue opening window. The need for these particular changes is to be a little more specific and provide the opportunity for the person who is inspecting that home to have specific information on what and where these particular alarms or monitors need to be placed. Without this direction, especially when we're allowing the opportunity for a third-party inspector to do these, it's going to be questionable as to whether they're doing it the same as the county inspectors would be doing.
Sure.
So this information, although it seems like it's a lot, it's really needed for the opportunity for inspectors to have that specificity of what's required and where it's required.
Great, great, okay. So I'd ask each of the two gentlemen in prep to identify yourselves, and then my question would be, have you had a chance to review this, and are you you agree with what is proposed in the bill? Right.
Yes, I've had the opportunity to review the information.
Green light on?
And with that, a lot of this was clarification, so when the inspectors do go out on site, it's very specific and clear to what the intent is of these codes.
Okay, so could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Brent Garner, Talbot County Building Official.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, Mike Dooley, Talbot County Code Compliance Officer, Chief Code Compliance Officer.
Okay. And have you had a chance to review the bill in regards to the safety and what you've heard today? Any concerns from your side of the table?
Yes, I have, sir, and they're all appear to be reasonable.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, good.
Thank you.
Any questions from any members of the commission again? Okay.
I do believe that the county attorney is on the phone, and he may have some comments that he'd like to share. We
Okay.
can check to see.
Okay.
I have one quick question. I'm
Sure.
sorry for just out of my own curiosity, is there a difference in what is behind an escape exit versus an emergency escape egress?
It's just the definition alone. When this was originally shown, the escape exit is not identified. This is more for clarification that it's an emergency escape. Also the egress. So when you look at it in the code, it defines what an egress opening is.
Okay, so it's defined in the code, whereas before the exit here did not address the egress part.
Correct.
Thank you.
Tony, are you on the call? Tony? Tony, are you on the call? Tony Cooper Smith?
I think the general point that the Office of Law wanted to make clear, several of the letters, some of the letters referred to STRs as commercial entities, and there was a question under Maryland law whether STRs were commercial, and there has been case law that supports that STRs are residential use
Yes.
and should not be referred to as commercial use. There was also some comments in regard to the ownership under an LLC, but even that doesn't make the use of the property commercial.
Right.
It's still residential use.
Correct.
That's my general assumption, and
Right.
if Tony
Right.
chimes in.
And I think that that was brought about during our planning commission meetings as well in chapter 190. And I guess we'll talk about. And I was requiring the owner for point of clarification, the owner to be present. Obviously, if it's in an LLC, then my presumption would be one of the either members or partners of the LLC would have to be present. I mean, just for point.
voted down. Why are you even talking about this?
So I don't know where the comment came from, but the reality is we are asked to make a recommendation to the county council on this bill. The planning commission has the authority to offer its opinion and suggested comments and or amendments. And then it's up to the county council to decide if they want to accept those comments and suggestions or not. So ultimately, the decision does lie with the county council, but it is our charge as an independent body to provide our opinion to the county council. So I hope that clarifies that. So at this point, the Planning Commission has received numerous emails and letters from concerned citizens on both sides of the issue. We have had adequate time to read those, especially since our meeting has been postponed a week. So we have had time to look at things. So at this time, I will open it to general comments from the public, and we will limit the comments to 3 minutes. So again, Miguel, if you would like to
Thank you. And
tell us how it's going to work.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I do have some individuals who registered in advance, and So I'm going to call them out on the phone. And for those not speaking, if you would so kindly just mute your phone so that we don't get any feedback. I'm going to ask for Keith Watts. Keith Watts, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Keith. Go ahead.
Yes. Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for your service. This bill has not received the adequate consideration that it needs. Despite the number of work sessions that there have been, the suggestions that have been made by the public have not been included unless they were, I'll just say it bluntly, anti-STR. Many of the changes discussed did not make this amendment. Many of the changes that were sent in never made the maker. Many of the literature requested during PIA mysteriously disappeared. Where, for example, is a changed application filed at any time versus January and February, June or July? It's curious to me that today, for the very first time, we are hearing amendments made by a planning commissioner who is in violation of the county charter. What I would say to you is this. This bill is either not ready to go to the county council, or the commissioners need to take a very close look at what has been added in this bill. These are not reasonable regulations anymore. They've imposed an incredible hardship on STR owners. There are no barbarians at the gate, no numbers of LSTs being purchased. There are now 30 or approximately 30 less STR licenses than when this process began 2 years ago. So if the goal was to eliminate STRs, or strangle them, or put a moratorium on them, or eliminate them altogether, then I must congratulate you. On the flip side, when we're adding amendments today, when the public has not had a chance to have a seat at the table with real and fair meeting, I challenge the council and the planning commission. You tell me that a law that says you can only have 2 people per bedroom, when the absurdity is that it's violated by the postman showing up, or the lawn person, or the gardener, 2-night minimums, occupancy issues, the list goes on, and instead of simplification and clarification, what we get is more burdensome. As for the commercial enterprises, that is well-settled law. In Maryland, they are not, period. As for the 1,000 feet, I think someone should take a close look at, should it be 1,000 feet in densely packed neighborhoods, or perhaps less so? I know I would encourage you in the strongest possible terms to go do a day in the life of an STR owner and find out what the paperwork really like. Look, see what it looks like. See the frustration that has been going on for 2 years. If I sound a little passionate about this, it's because the 130 owners, and some of those people are LLCs. Why? For tax purposes. No one likes to pay taxes. Funny that STRs pay taxes, but B&Bs don't. Hotels don't. And why are B&Bs held to different standards? They don't have any of these safety requirements. Any. Do we care less about the people who come and stay in Talbot County than those who stay in B&Bs? And B&Bs are in neighborhoods right cheek by jowl with STRs. All we're asking for is you folks need to justify to us how is it that we are being treated differently, punitively, in some view. I respect that. Listen, no one could be more concerned about neighborhoods being vulnerable. No one wants to have parties, and I think you can ask Chief Jewell, I mean, sitting there right with you, how many violations have there actually been? Wow, the big money generators are somebody advertised incorrectly. Is that really what we're worried about? Really? I don't think it is. I don't think that's the intent that you wanted. Now, we may differ on whether there should be STRs at all or none. I get that, and I respect those opinions. But STRs have been in Talbot County for more than 20 years. And I challenge you, I challenge each of the commissioners How many real violations have there been? How many real problems have there been? And just the standard of, I'll go back to the text of the bill. Here's just one. See, 3 minutes is not enough, and I'm going to wrap it up and yield back my time. But I'll say this. When you have a law that is so vague that says, oh, it has to be investigated immediately. I can just picture somebody sitting in their bedroom in their bunny slippers with their spyglass out the window, calling up poor Chief Dugal, and he's got to run around the county all night long just because somebody saw a 7th person on a property that only required 6. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your service. I know these are difficult questions. I know, as Lincoln said, you can please some people all the time, some people all the time, and not everybody all the time, right? But there has to be a compromise. There has to be reasonableness. And these are, like I said, I want you, each of you, if none of you are STR property owners, you really should go through the process yourself, or attend a seminar, or let us show you what it's like. And then you may have a completely different take on it. Because we're not commercial enterprises. We're the people who live next door to you, who employ the gardeners, and the plumbers, and the landscapers, and the pool people, and whose people who stay in our places fill the restaurants and generate the tax revenue for Talbot County. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Mr. Watts, could you state your address for the record?
Yes, it is 5800 Tillman Beach Drive, Tillman, Maryland, 21671.
Thank you, Mr.
Again,
Watts.
thank you.
Mr. Watts, thank you. You make some good points. I appreciate your calling in this morning.
Next, we have Monica Adi. Ms. Adi, could you state your address for the record?
Yes, good morning. My address is 229 Madison Avenue, St. Michael's.
Thank you, Monica.
Okay. So, first of all, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning. And just a couple areas that I want to comment on. You know, as was said earlier, Bill 1446 reflects a lot of work sessions, a lot of different input. And I actually think on the whole, it does a pretty good job of balancing the need for an efficient process by the SCR permit applicants. There's a lot of changes to the process, and also still keeping in account of the needs of resident neighbors who want basically to have a safe and peaceful quality of life. In two areas, there were 2 areas that I had a concern with. One, there was some discussion among the board members, and I could not hear all of it, but I absolutely agree with the commission members, the commissioners, who expressed the point of view that the property owner needs to be present at the hearing for all the reasons they stated. And just additionally to point out, I mean, I think it's a way potentially to head off potential issues. You know, you get the owner together with the neighbors, and maybe there's a way to come up with a relatively simple solution. So I think that's really important to keep that requirement. The second area that I had a concern about is the change to the notice requirement for the dense zones. I happen to live in a dense zone, and I'm on the water, and I can tell you that I can hear sounds from properties that are more than 500 feet across the water, conversations even sometimes. And the current requirement is to send a notice to property owners within 1,000 feet of the STR, including those that are in the line of sight within 1,000 feet. And I think this has worked pretty well. So, for the dense zones, you have potentially more people who are going to be impacted by the STR. So why are you taking away the right for those people to receive notice? The bill already takes account of a cost concern that a lot of STR applicants expressed. The current provisions, as you know, require 2 notices to be sent, 2 separate notices, one of the application, one of the hearing. And the bill has a provision now that will change that, and I think that's a good provision. It's 1 notice. It informs the neighbors of both the application and the hearing date at the same time. That's going to be a significant way for the applicants, STR applicants, to reduce the cost. So those are the two areas, again, that I had concerns about, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Thank you for sticking with us this morning. Miguel, do we have any further?
Ms. Susan DuPont? Ms. DuPont, are you on the call?
I believe I am.
Thank
Can you
you.
hear me all right?
We sure can. Can you state your address for the record?
Of course, 6870 Travelers Rest Circle.
Thank you.
I too appreciate all that you all did, I guess over 5 years, to have us at this improving place for STRs and other aspects of the county. And I want to agree entirely with and appreciate your thoughts about having an owner present for that one meeting for their first application, the new one, and agree with the fact they could avoid conflict and solve it before it even grows, and give them a sense of our culture and our expectations, and us a feel for them, so that there is a chance to be cooperative and not on edge every time the house turns over. Secondly, I agree about the 1,000 feet. And then thirdly, something that has not been brought up, and I just wanted to talk about a little, is I understand that the applications now will be uploaded by the applicant online and available to us. And the discussion last fall through many of those work sessions also included the complaints and the process of complaints. And Compliance Officer Dual is a wonderful place to start with this, and it's been very helpful because that was part of what happened with NSF 190. But over the years, people have lost trust in that system, and we need to rebuild that so that you will hear the concerns out loud. And one of the ways to also increase transparency for all is to allow the complaints to also be posted online. What is there to hide? We want to make this a collaborative process and a legitimate complaint. And I understand Mr. Locke's point of view that there will be people who abuse that, but in the majority of people are really reluctant. They would like to work with you. So thank you for your time. Thank you for all the energy and thoughtfulness, and take care.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Next we have Mr. Bob Haas. Bob, are you on the line?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Can you state your address for the record?
Yep, mine is Bob Haas. I live at 936 Riverview Terrace in the subdivision of Bentley Hay, just outside of St. Michael's.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so before I start with my main talk, I want to comment on a couple of things. I think Mr. Watt and a couple other people have said that there's a big difference between the B&B regulations and the short-term rental regulations, and there is. And I'm sure if the county would impose the B&B regulations on the short-term rentals, all the opposition for short-term rentals would go away. And the other thing I wanted to mention was about the egress, just a little clarification. The egress laws were passed way back, I think, in '87 or before that, by the fire marshals and the fire department, not so much for people be able to get out of a building, but more for the firemen to get into the building to perform rescues with their equipment. The changes to the windows, I have no problem with that. The only thing I would ask them to look at would be the stairways. Again, think about a fireman going into a smoke-filled house, trying to rescue people that aren't familiar with the house, and going down a stairway that has a low ceiling and whacking his head. So those are my two comments on that. But to get back to what we were talking about, I said I live in Bentley Hay. We are a small community. The elected officials from Bentley Hay and Renovation, which is the same as the Bentley Hay, had sent a letter in which I'm sure you all read it and you have given it serious consideration. I'd like to just tell you, there was a short-term rental board meeting last week for a property in Bentley Hay. And this property was exactly what one of your commissioners had mentioned. It was a monster corporation that bought this property strictly for commercial use. And the owner, or not the owner, the rep, they had an attorney that wrote there, said that they plan on buying more properties. It was next to a licensed B&B that had operated for 20-some years, which, going back to the B&Bs again, this short-term rental could not be a B&B because the B&B regulations would not allow it. So at the public hearing, there were probably approximately 40 neighbors that wrote letters in opposition from both Rio Vista and Bentley Hay, and it included the elected officials from both those communities again. The letters were read out in the testimony by the county staff. Only one was in support, and the one that was in support owns a business that depends on tourism in St. Michael's. Before this, there were 2 existing short-term rentals in Bentley Hay. Neither one of those property owners wrote in support of this third one. So after the vote, it was a 3-2 vote. There was no conditions put on the property. We now have 3 in Bentley Hay on the same street. This afternoon, the board's reviewing another application for another short-term rental on Riverview Terrace. So that would, when that one gets approved, that'll be 4. There's another one that's in the works that was turned down a little over a year ago that's been working on taking care of the safety features so they can come back in and request a short-term rental. That would make 5 in our little community of Bentley Hay. We asked that the commission maybe make a recommendation to the county to open up as a change to look at these TR zones. I think it was mentioned a couple times, that our TR zones are the most densely packed areas in Talbot County. We're more like Easton and more like St. Michael's. I don't know if you all know, but Easton does not allow short-term rentals unless it is owned by a principal owner.
We could ask you to wrap up, we're approaching the 3-minute mark.
Okay. I just wanted, I'd like the commission to just make a recommendation to the council that one size does not fit all for short-term rentals. There's a big difference between a short-term rental on a 50-acre lot and one on a quarter-acre lot in Bentley Hay. Thank you.
I completely agree with you, Mr. Haas. Thank you. Yeah.
Next we have Mr. Scott Kane. Scott, are you on the call?
I am, Miguel, if you can hear me.
Sure, we can hear you. Could you state your address for the record?
Scott Kane, 26233 Hamilton Court West, Easton, Maryland.
So, Mr. Kane,
not here to offer.
Yep, Mr. Kane, before you start, I'm going to ask, are you testifying as a citizen or are you testifying as chairman of the short-term review board?
Thank you for that question. I was not actually testifying. All I wanted to do was make myself available to answer any questions in fulfilling my duties as chairman of the short-term rental board.
Perfect. That's great. Yep, okay.
Thanks, Scott. I'm not sure I've identified you. Scott, did you come in early on the call when you started when you called in to participate in the meeting? Were you early in?
I've been on the phone pretty much the whole time.
Okay.
8:30.
Okay, I've identified you. Thank you. I'll make sure you're unmuted during this conversation so that you're available for any questions. Next we have Cindy Reichert. Cindy, are you on the call?
I am on the call.
Thank you. Could you state your address for the record?
Yes, my address is 8612 Silver Point Road, Whitman, Maryland, 21676.
Thank you, and I know you recently appointed as well to the Short-Term Rental Review Board.
Yeah, I actually just have a question, and that is Bill 1446 identical to Bill 1443, or were there additions, changes, edits to the new bill?
It's the same bill that was previously introduced by the council. The planning commission today has noted potentially a suggestion for a few amendments that we would provide to the council for them to decide whether they want to incorporate those or not. But the bill as written is the same as the previously written bill.
And then I would just add the amendments that the planning office have suggested to us are related to the safety, and I don't think they, I'm not saying they're minor, they're just,
They don't significantly.
yeah, they don't significantly change it. It's just clarifying it from an enforcement standpoint. So.
That was also confirmed by the county attorney before I presented it.
Cindy,
Thank you. And I assume that once those changes are incorporated or whatever, that'll be available on the website or somehow for folks to review?
We will post that with the bill as suggested amendments by the planning commission if they choose to introduce those, and what we forward to the county council. The county council will still have to decide whether they accept those amendments and they get incorporated or not.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. And we have Ms. Dawn Lednam signed up to speak. Dawn, are you on the call? Dawn Lednam, are you on the call? One more time for Dawn Lednam. Can I ask, is there anybody else on the call who would like to speak?
Yes, there is.
Sure. Could you identify yourself, your name and address, please?
Yes, my name is Barbara Lane, and I reside at 9353 Bantry Road here in Easton.
Thank you.
And I'd like to, okay?
Go ahead.
Are we okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. I think it's wonderful that we're trying to improve and clarify these STR guidelines, but I'd like to take this opportunity to please ask you to not overlook the importance of your instructions to the STR Review Board to consider the importance of how these STRs affect our neighborhood. The impact that they have on our neighborhood, I think is terribly important. We as property owners in these neighborhoods, I feel that our rights are sometimes being ignored by this STR problem. We are full-time residents of the county. My husband's been here for generations. This is our home. We full-time residents, we go to the restaurants also. We go to the businesses also. We go to them all year long. We volunteer in this county. We support nonprofits, the schools, the whole thing. And I feel that our right to our neighborhood is important also. We live here. These are our homes. These are our investments. We didn't purchase our homes in commercial neighborhoods. We purchased them in neighborhoods because of the peace and the camaraderie of our neighborhoods. And I feel that we have to proceed very cautiously and with wisdom so that we don't lose the integrity of our neighborhoods. This is so important for the quality of life here in Talbot County, and I just cannot state strongly enough and ask you strongly enough to please make sure that our neighborhoods are not impacted negatively by these STRs. I think our rights are important also. Thank you very, very much for the hard work and the time that you've put in on this. And I wish you continued success with this issue. It's not an easy one. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else on the call who would like to speak? Mr. Chairman, I think that's everybody.
Okay. Mr. Kane, if you're still with us, I'd like to bring you back up. I have a couple questions for you. Great. That's great. So, yeah. My first question would be, as far as we've talked a little bit about the owner to be present, and I see it was the Short-Term Rental Review Board's recommendation that be their preference, but there be condition if there was, certain circumstances that would provide a real hardship. Do you want to comment on that any further, or are you okay with where you stand on that?
Sure, I'd be glad to comment. The recommendation of the short-term rental board, after hearing all the testimony that Ms. Verdry so accurately described the process, we heard a lot of comments that it would make sense to have the owner be required to append. And the 2 points that have been made previously in this discussion are, first of all, that it would give us a chance as a short-term rental review board to directly assess the capability of the owner to operate the facility. It's much easier to ask questions directly of the owner. And secondly, the point was that in a couple of cases, we felt the need to negotiate between the owner and the nearby residents. I can think of one case where a nearby resident didn't want hunting on the short-term rental property, and it turned out the owner wasn't interested in that either, so that was a stipulation that was easily solved right on the floor. The third thing really on that is that it's very useful to have the owner there to hear directly what they have to say. They know a lot more about their operation than somebody that's representing them. We've also had a situation where we have direction to provide to the owner based on the application. And if the owner is represented professionally by an attorney or something, we have a confidence that that information gets relayed back to the owner. On the other hand, the owner, under the current guise, is able to appoint anybody as their representative. And we've had a couple of situations that I can think back to where we directed certain things we wanted the owner to understand based on our approval. And it turned out that the resident agent was not able to completely understand what our points were, so there was a concern that they our instructions weren't being communicated back to legal experts. For those reasons, we felt that it was useful to have the owner present.
Great. Okay. In regard to the notice, the mailing notification, the 500 foot as opposed to the 1,000 foot, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. I think this summary was very accurate. It was 1,000 feet, and there was some testimony in our workshops that there was owners for densely packed neighborhoods, such as Tillman and other places, where a lot of notice was required, and there were 2 notices required. So the compromise was to reduce the notices from 2 to 1, and also use some of the more modern techniques, as opposed to having a certified mail green card come back and have tally and tabulate those. The post office offers automated online services, which make it much easier for everybody. So the notice requirement was simplified so that densely packed areas wouldn't be as impacted by the notice requirement. So that was the solution that we came up with, and it's one that we would still recommend.
Okay. How about the distance, the 500 feet notification in certain zones as opposed to 1,000?
I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that point. Yes, we feel that 1,000 is the appropriate number. And the reason, and we simplified the process so it was easy to notify within 1,000 feet.
Right.
And I would point out that there, on the other side of that, there are places where there's an estate where notification of 1,000 feet doesn't touch any neighbor, and yet there are private roads where people are impacted, where the road is 1.5 miles long. So that's still a problematic area. If you're in a large area, 1,000 feet is not enough. Based on testimony, it was our recommendation that we keep 1,000 feet and that we reduce the burden of the notice requirement.
Great, very good. Those are the only questions I have. At this time, I'll turn it over to other Planning Commission members while we still got you on the line. Commissioner Stranahan?
Yes, thank you. Just to address, something came up with Mr. Haas and his consideration in these town residential zoned areas. Is there any consideration currently given, or should there be currently given in the future by the review board of trying to limit the numbers of STRs that are approved and licensed in these neighborhoods that are very densely populated, and has a much bigger effect on the nature of the neighborhood, and as Ms. Lane said also, the nature of these neighborhoods in Talbot County than it does in an area. There's an SDR near me where I live. It's quite a ways away on a very large piece of property, and it hasn't had any effect on us whatsoever. However, if I had very close neighbors in a TR zone, it would be more of a concern.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, we do take that into consideration. It's hasn't been clear exactly how that is going to roll out. If you go back to the legislation of 2 years ago when the Step 190 was approved, the planning and zoning made the recommendation that there be an STR board established, which is where our authorization springs from. And in that discussion, it was described that the STR board would be in place to consider things like impact on the neighborhood and do it on a case-by-case basis, as opposed to Mr. Haas was recommending that it be applied to all the TR zone. That would be another good solution. That wasn't adopted by the county council. What was adopted was the STR board mechanism and giving us broad authority to consider neighborhood issues. As I say, we haven't worked our way all the way through this yet as a board, and particularly with the situation down in Bentley Hay and Rio Vista, where there is dense packing, and we, in my opinion, we do need to consider this, as several people have testified. On the other hand, in fairness, I say that there are other board members that feel that that's not something that should be considered. So it's an ongoing debate, but any clarification that we could get on that from either the Planning Commission or the County Council would be welcome.
Thank you for that, and thank you for all you do with the board. I'd just like to make one comment, and it's in numerous emails that have come around, and comments or whatever, questioning why your board even exists when no one else in the state or possibly even the country has such a thing. I would propose that maybe we're the ones doing it correctly, and everyone else should follow our lead. And thank you for your service with that.
Yeah. Commissioner Desi?
Well, thank you for your comment. We work hard to make sure we get the balance right and listen to all the citizens and every applicant, and we hope we get it right. I will say that we have, of some 60-plus applications that we've heard, I think we've turned down only one. Another one was withdrawn. And the only reasons that we really have turned people down so far is safety violations that we want to see corrected, and some people withdraw their application rather than reapply in that situation. And that's the other one is if there are too many complaints, and I'd like to compliment Mr. Dool and his organization for handling the complaints in such a thorough and effective manner, and I think it's benefited the county that he and his office are there and available to the citizens.
Very good. Commissioner Desi?
Mr. Kane, thank you so much for being on the line, and thank you for navigating with your entire board the complex questions that come to mind. I have a question with regard to the provisions when there is concern in a specific community. Let's just take, for example, Bentley Hayes, which, as I understand it, had a hearing last week. Is there a provision for homeowners that live in that community to be against their voices heard other than what's laid out in the regulation of safety if something's been tripped and the owner hasn't met the requirement? Is there some provision that the homeowner and a group of homeowners can object and be heard?
Yes, if I understand your question correctly, we have to allow a broad variety of testimony. And with respect to neighborhood concerns, specifically to the Bentley Hay application we heard last week, we received, I think, over 40 comments on that. And it has been mentioned by a previous caller that there were preponderance of concerns about the impact on the neighborhood, and only one comment that was in favor of that. So we're still trying to balance that. The legislation that enables the short-term rental board clearly says that we have the authority to approve or deny for virtually any reason. It has to be a logical, rational reason. But some of the board members feel that the neighbors, especially when they come out of the numbers that they did on this application, should be heard and certainly have a point with respect that needs to be considered in an application. Does that answer your question, Ms. Casey?
And let me take it, it begins to, let me take it a step further, is when they have a voice against it, and the outcome of that particular vote was to vote, did the board vote for that STR?
We're a bit of a new board. There are 2 new board members, and this is their first hearing, and 3 current board members. The vote was 3-2 in favor of approving the application. There was a technical discussion about the number of people who could rent at that house, and it was limited by 2 parking spaces, which meant that it was 4 people that could be approved for that location. So we approved that with the stipulation that the owner has to come back in a year to check and see if they complied with all of the other requirements. So that was the way that was handled, but there were, as I said, there were about 40 or so people that were testifying that it should not be approved, and there was only 1 or 2 that wanted it approved.
Yeah, and I apologize for not really knowing the details of that because I don't want to really bring up all the details, but it just, I guess my underlying thought is if you have 40 people objecting or 38, if 39, whatever, one was abstaining, what is enough in terms of saying no? And I just ask that you consider that, and I appreciate, again, I don't know all the details of this particular matter, so I know you've got a lot of considerations. But if you just...
I will convey your concerns to the board, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you for that. And then my second question has to do with a certain correspondence we received from a Mr. Keith Watts, who I believe was our first speaker today. He makes a claim, and I'm not quite sure if it's accurate, and I just wanted to ask if you could share that with us. In his June 23rd email, he says, unfortunately, owners who rent homes, I'll skip the middle part, were never allowed or invited to give live testimony before the council. Is that true?
I couldn't quite hear you. The owners are allowed to rent homes.
We're going to defer that question to Mary Kay. Mary Kay?
So the county council has introduced this legislation, and they are scheduling it for a public hearing. I believe it's
Next week, Tuesday,
next
actually
Tuesday.
on the 14th.
So they haven't had their public hearing. That the process of legislation, this introduction, then a public hearing, and then they move it to third reader to vote on it. So they haven't had their public hearing on this, just based on the timing of this. And generally, they don't have their public hearing until after the planning commission has made a recommendation. That's part of the public hearing. I provide the planning commission's recommendation, and or sometimes a planning commission member will attend to help provide that notification.
So in particular, that hasn't happened yet, so it's not that they haven't been given the chance according to this memo, but also, have they not been given the chance over the last 2 years to comment? I mean, they have been
They've had 2 work sessions with the short-term rental review board and staff where we went over each of those things, and that's where they made the straw poll vote, whether they wanted that to move forward as legislation, whether it's something that could be handled by just amending an application, whether it's something they just did not support. Some things that I will show you this in a few minutes. This is a little flyer that was developed by our office associated with house rules and how to be a good neighbor that came out of the suggestions and the interactions with the short-term rental review board and the county council. So they have seen all of this and had public work sessions where the public attended, but they didn't have an opportunity to see.
So but what you're telling me is that everybody's had equal opportunity to, when the time is appropriate, to comment.
Correct.
This makes it sound like, someone has been totally left out of the game, and I don't think that that's a fair statement.
There was open public comment at 4 separate meetings with the short-term rental review board where the public could make comments. Then the short-term rental review board developed a list from there that we took to the county council that was put into this matrix of changes. The county council made their straw poll vote, and we developed legislation out of that document. That has been introduced by the county council, and they will have their public hearing next week on it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frederick.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to ask if any of the commission members have any questions for Mr. Gardner or Mr. Gould. They're welcome to stay as far as I'm concerned, or if they have other things before them, they can go. But I have no further questions for.
Just another question, but when we started this process a few years ago, I look back at the record and you'd see my comments were that how this is going to go depends on the details and how we set it up. And I'm going to echo Mr. Stranahan in his comments as saying that, just because other areas don't have the short-term rental review board doesn't make us right or wrong. I truly believe what, like Mr. Stranahan said, that does make us the leader, and it's right. And I think we are on the right path. And if you guys do exit, I think what you've been doing and helping this go smoothly and helping build the community in the right way I thank you for what you've done, because I know it is difficult. It's a very, very lightning rod topic. So your seats are not the most comfortable, but you've done a good job, so thank you.
Thank you.
And again, you're welcome to stay, but if I know you have other things on your agenda, so, but thank you for your time. Yeah. So, Commissioner Gezzi, anything further?
No, I don't.
Okay, great. Okay. Commissioner Speed?
Yeah. I'm just going to state, on the record again, just, I'm pretty sure I know how the vote's going to go. How we've talked about this, we're not all going to get what we want, And again, I want to reiterate that I do think it's been a productive process, and it's gone the way that community and community building should go. Do I think that it's a little onerous? Do I think we've gone a little too far? In my opinion, yes. But is it something that a deal breaker on where we're at? No. But I just want for everybody to consider that the idea that ourselves or the county council haven't taken into consideration our communities, our towns, our heritage, and what this could do to us. I strongly disagree with that statement. It's been on the forefront of every commissioner that I've talked to about how we discuss it, how we vote. It's been a deep, deep concern of ours, and all I can say is that that we are working to get it right, and whether we pass this or not pass this, doesn't mean the short-term rental discussion is done and will never be touched again. We need to stay on top of this. We need to community members to stay on top of it, and if there's issues that arise, we want to get it right. And again, the difference of opinion always are going to, that's always going to be there, but I do think this process has gone well. I think, in my personal opinion, it's a little stronger than it needs to be, but that's how it goes. I will close with just saying that I do think if we get if we define or get a little stronger, or figure out how we can make that owner agent a little stronger, I do think in the long term there's going to be value to that. That an active owner agent that regularly interacts with the short-term rental board and ourselves is going to be just as strong, if not stronger, than the owner in representing the short-term rental, in my opinion.
Thank you. Mr. Kane, are you still on the line with us?
It looks like he is no longer on the line.
Okay, great. Okay. The only thing I would say...
Actually, I'm sorry.
Yep.
He is on the line.
Yep. Mr. Kane, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay. So one of the things that we really struggled with as a planning commission when we did Chapter 190 with short-term rentals were the communities of Bentley, Hay, and Rio Vista. And as was said earlier, we struggled to find a way to paint the whole county with a broad brush. So the idea was to give the short-term rental review board the purview to look at all those things that you talked about. And as a planning commission member sitting here today, when I look at Bentley, Hay, and Rio Vista, we're there. Enough's enough. And I would encourage the short-term rental review board, for what it's worth, to consider the negative effects. It's a small community, small houses, small lots, small streets, and please give that some consideration. Again, it's just my opinion, and I know it's varied, but again, we're there. We're at capacity there, in my opinion. So again, at this time, are there any further staff comments? Okay. We're moving right along here. I know there's another meeting this afternoon. If someone has something burning they'd like to say, we'll say it. If not, I think we're ready to move forward with this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm ready to prepare a motion for recommendation, and I'm suggesting that the way to do this is to take the matrix that's provided to us and focus on a few issues. So I will try that. We'll see how it goes. I move that we recommend to the county council that the results from the workshop, we focused on a couple of issues that we would recommend strengthening. One is the issue number 15 with regard to the owner being present at the first hearing. I recommend that we support that. And the second one was the 1,000 feet rule that be reestablished. And that the staff conditions with regard to safety, those amendments be included too.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is a motion by Mr. Boycourt to recommend approval of bill number 1446 with the amendments that he suggested. One is that the owner be present at the initial hearing, that notice go back to property owners within 1,000 feet, and third, that the safety sheet, the amendments that staff provided us under item 9 be incorporated into bill 1446. Is that correct, Bill?
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
I'll second.
Point of clarification. I agree with one of the three. So in my objection, should I state for the clarity of the council why I'm rejecting, or should I just say a no vote?
You can certainly provide, yes. I mean, I think now that it's second, there's an opportunity for conversation
Right.
before the motion.
Yep.
I'd like to say one or two things real quick.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Boycourt, a second by Commissioner Stranahan. Further discussion. Mary Kay?
So one of the recommendations that are in the letters associated with the owner being present, there was also an opportunity for the owner just to call in. So I don't know if that's something that you want to incorporate into, sometimes they're live far away or, have emergencies or other situations that may not allow them to physically attend.
Yeah.
So maybe including that as part of it, the motion that they either be present if available or an opportunity, if circumstances require it, that they, at a minimum, they call in and participate in the meeting.
What's the pleasure of the commission?
Bill, are you all right with that addition to your motion?
I'm thinking about it. I'm not wild about it, frankly.
Commissioner Gezzi?
I'm not wild about it either. I look at it this way. This is a one-time showing, and I mean, if you have one house, you have to show once. And so in terms of this, if there's revenue to be generated over this home and this homeowner really wants to move forward with this, I think that, or the homeowner, that they should know that they need to be present at the first application hearing. And that's what I'm understanding. Is that correct? It's the first application hearing and that's all?
Correct.
For a new license.
For a new license, okay, for a new license.
And if for some reason, if they cannot make that meeting, whether it's a health issue or an emergency, they can postpone that to another date. It just would put off the approval or not of their license.
And I think that's important to reinforce that, they are wanted in the room to their presence and their opinion.
Paul?
And Mr. King gave us on the ground defense of that in ways that I couldn't, and I appreciate his comments. It appears that really helps, and I've respected to do so, to see, and also to get the message back through the directly to the owner, as well as making compromises that I think those are attractive, but above all, they have to make sure that the owner has the attention, or that the short-term rental review board has the attention of the owner. So I'm comfortable with the motion as proposed.
Okay. Paul?
Yeah, I'll just state my opinion again. I just think we're assuming that these short-term rental people are, in this, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. It's just, we're assuming the worst about them, and I think this is overkill on something. Almost everything else we deal with in law and society, we're able to either sign, have a professional of a lawyer represent us, or we can be represented by a real estate agent. There's many things that are just as important to our community where we allow a professional or some sort of agent representing us. So to impose this on the short-term rental thing, to me, is, in my opinion, is a limiting factor for this industry, and it's just, I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me, and I'm going to oppose that portion, and I know I'm in the minority.
Okay. Anything further, Mary Kay?
I do have one other comment, just in regard to the 1,000-foot rule, just for clarity. That was proposed that it says, however, if the property is within the VH, the VM, the VR, the RR, and TR zoning districts, then the notice can be reduced to 500 feet. Just for clarity, it primarily came up because of notifications within the village of Tillman, that when you hit 1,000 feet in that particular village, it was a significant number of property owners, and there was a concern whether that was needed to go that far. Wanted just to make sure, do you want to maybe amend that to keep it to the villages? and remove the RR and the TR from that? Or do you want to strike all of those that were recommended for the reduction?
Well, that was why I asked it as a special exception if it was 1,000 feet across the board. In other words, a precedent is set there. And Tillman is the one that I thought about that would possibly be burdensome. But again, it's up for
just for clarification, it's 1,000 feet for certain applications that go in front of the Board of Appeals. For other applications in front of the Planning Commission, it's neighboring property owners, adjacent property owners, I should say.
Right. Okay. So
I think keeping in consideration the waterways, and there was a comment from one of the people that called in that you could hear quite a way over the waterways. I think 1,000 feet is reasonable.
Okay. Commissioner Stranahan?
I concur, and I think there are some other neighborhoods that 1,000 feet. There are a lot of, much like Tillman, there are neighborhoods we've talked about today where it becomes a lot of notifications, but within 1,000 feet, those people are still concerned and affected.
Okay.
Just want to clarify.
Yep.
Again, I'm going to oppose this. I'm in support of the 500 feet also, just like we heard testimony on. There is not going to be a right number. We're never going to find the right number. Out in the rural sectors, 1,000, he said, 1,000 feet's not enough. So each way we go, we're going to not pick the right number. And I do think, with the stipulations of the certain community types, going down to 500 feet in those and getting a significant number of the community involved is what's important. It's not, it's just, that's the initial outreach and communication. It doesn't take any of the rights away from the people that don't get a letter. And I would guarantee if 100 people get a letter that the next house over isn't going to hear about it. I find that hard to believe. I would imagine if 100 people in a community get a letter, pretty much everybody in that community is going to hear it. So I'm fine with the 500 feet. It does what I want it to do. It protects us. It gives the community and the neighbors some protection of knowing what's going on and what's happening in the community. So the distance in all of this doesn't make me nervous as much as the community not knowing what's going on is what makes me nervous. So actually, the 1,000 feet being too short out in the rural community is a bigger concern of mine than the 500 feet versus 1,000 feet.
I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood. Are you saying, Paul, to leave this language as it is?
I like to change down from 1,000 to 500 feet in the areas that are noted in the
VHBM. So I think what you're saying, though, and that the language that we have here from 2A through 3 little I remains the same.
Correct.
Okay, good. That's okay.
Yeah. Bill, do you want to weigh in on anything?
I missed the last couple of minutes of discussion. That's all. Yeah.
So basically, Paul is okay with the language in the bill that leaves in certain zones notification at 500 feet. I think that kind of sums it up.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, if there's no further discussion, again, we have a motion on the table for ready to vote. Miguel?
Commissioner Boycourt?
Aye.
Commissioner Stranahan?
Aye.
Commissioner Gezzi?
Aye.
Commissioner Spies?
No.
Chairman Council? Aye. Vote is 4-1.
Okay. Next on our... Sure. So, Miguel, we have another meeting scheduled for this room at 1 o'clock, is that correct?
We do.
Okay. So we've got working Waterfront and Cordova Master Plan. Do you think we'll be okay if we take a 5 or 10 minute break here real quick and come back? Okay. Yep. Right. And we will reconvene. And the remaining items on the agenda for those that are joining us remotely are the draft Cordova Village Master Plan and the draft Working Waterfront Overlay Master.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So this room is scheduled for another meeting shortly. So we are going to postpone 2 agenda items. One is the draft Cordova Village Master Plan. The other is the draft Working Waterfront Overlay District. We're going to postpone those 2 items until our August, is it 3rd? August 5th, our August 5th meeting. So we will finish up the rest of the agenda items. Next on the agenda, staff matters. Mary Kay, do you have anything?
No, sir.
Okay. Work sessions?
No.
Okay. Commission matters, we do have 2 things. Commissioner Guzzi, do you want to start that discussion?
I just have one special request, Ms. Verdery. The decision summaries come along with the packet, typically the Friday before the Wednesday meeting. I've been involved in a number of boards. I know these aren't minutes, but it's a decision summary, where it has been so helpful, and I've been the secretary of the board in 2 cases actually, but I've been on other boards where if the minutes are done immediately following the meeting, they're one, a lot faster. It's easier to pull them together because the information's at the forefront of your mind, and 2, they're more accurate. And I know that this is kind of a change in process, but I wanted to see if you could consider having the decision summaries written up quickly after the meeting. They don't necessarily have to be provided to us, but it would be nice if we could have them even just by an email. And then not wait until the Friday before the meeting, because by then it's like a month later, and it's just more difficult to go back. I go back to my notes and things just to refresh my memory on what's happening. It would be better to capture the information right away. So I just ask that you consider that you move that part of it up, and then they could be included with the packet as well.
Okay.
So, just to be clear, are you just asking us to complete that document earlier, or to complete it and provide it to the planning commission earlier than the Friday before the meeting?
I actually, now that I think complete and send would be very helpful.
The following week after planning commission, we have our TAC meeting. You know, so there's a lot of things that are going on in our office that dictate when and how, you know, the administrative staff can take the time to do these minutes and decision summaries. So there's a lot of things that affect whether they get done the week after or 2 or 3 weeks after. So we'll certainly do our best to try to work that in and make that, you know, more efficient and more closer to the time that we have the meeting, and certainly we'll provide it as soon as they're done. We'll provide those versus waiting to.
And again, they can go email, you know, through the
email.
Yeah.
And my only point on the timing is that I've found it takes me half the time to complete them if I do them right after the meeting versus right up, you know, the days before the next meeting or weeks after the last. So I appreciate you thinking about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The next item is we had our recommendation to the county council on Trap East Holdings, and depending on what the county council decides to do with that, if they do decide to move forward and find that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan, I think we should consider having a workshop with the Trap Planning Commission to develop a relationship. This is going to be a long-going process, and to, you know, I realize they have the final say, but I can't imagine that they aren't interested in what, you know, what we have to say and maybe that would be an annual thing or see, but just feel it out, see what happens. But if no one objects, I would ask the staff to monitor that and then see where it goes.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I think it's an excellent
Good suggestion. I think that really is a good suggestion.
Yeah, good. Okay. All right. So we'll try to move forward with that based on what the county council decides to do. Are there any other matters to come before the commission this morning? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Spies, a second by Commissioner Stranahan to adjourn. the meeting at 12:30. So all those in favor signify, oh, Miguel, I guess we have to do the,
Commissioner Boycourt?
Aye.
Commissioner Strahan?
Aye.
Commissioner Gezi?
Aye.
Mr. Steves?
Aye.
Chairman's council.
aye, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.